in Chicago and Burns Harbor, Indiana. The two master contracts expire at midnight Tuesday. The master agreements in the steel industry cover about 30,000 workers. ATI locked out 2,200 USW members at 12 locations August 15th after several months of bargaining. That contract expired June 30th. Steelworker Jeremy Williamson told a local Pittsburgh TV station the fight for a fair steel contract is unifying the workers.
It's brought us together. We're probably going to have well over 1,000 or 2,000 people here today, if not more. It sounds like it's going to be bigger than last time. Just glad to be part of it.
OSHA says there were safety violations that factored in the death of Kenneth LaChance, a maintenance manager at Waukesha Iron and Metal in Wisconsin. OSHA is proposing penalties of $42,000 for the 11 safety violations found by OSHA investigators. OSHA says the company didn't require head protection, didn't safely handle compressed gas cylinders, and forklifts were unsafe. The company also failed to adequately train workers to use forklifts. LaChance was killed operating a forklift without a helmet while trying to hoist an oxygen sensor. Christine Zortman, OSHA's area director in Milwaukee, says common sense safety precautions should always be priority one on any work site. The Florida-based Coalition of Immokalee Workers has made major strides in its campaign for fair food to change horrendous working conditions for farm workers in America's produce fields. September 10th through the 13th, their Student Farm Worker Alliance is meeting to launch back-to-school escalation plans in their Wendy's student boycott and to build strength and solidarity across grassroots movements for justice. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers, Gerardo Reyes Chavez, says that the Fair Food Campaign, getting fast food and grocery stores to pay a little more to ensure justice for workers in their supply chains, is resonating nationwide.
This is a time in which conscious consumers are asking for the same thing that we started to ask many years back when we started this fight: to be respected, to be paid a dignified wage. And for the first time, things are changing. And we don't have to give up our dignity when we go to work in the fields.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and from the United Auto Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Bernie Sanders on the picket line. Say it ain't so. I got to be honest. I was expecting it to be President Obama during his term in office because he said he was going to put on those comfortable shoes and do that walking on the picket line. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe Bernie's going to move him back in that direction. As I understand, on Friday, Bernie will be taking to the picket line. We'll talk to the folks at the BCDGM a little bit about that event. There's tons of stuff going on that you just kind of go, where do you even begin? I mean, the presidential race, so much fun there, lots of worker news. And also we'll talk a little bit about when is it okay to disobey? Is there such thing as intelligent disobedience? Lots of fun that game. Today, day 64, without a budget here in Pennsylvania. Congratulations. We're moving towards that, moving down the road towards the record. And, back during the Rendell years, we hit the record there. I think they're working on it. Now there's some talk. And what I found interesting is the governor wants to have some private discussions. And you've got people going nuts. Well, we can't have that. We want transparency. And look, I'm as much a transparency person as anyone, but I do understand that you can say and do things behind closed doors that you wouldn't do in public. And that by doing those things behind closed doors, you do have the ability to maybe argue a little bit, fight, scream, break a couple of things, throw things at each other, that kind of stuff that might actually bring people, I don't know, back to the table so we don't have to go to 100 days, 120 days. Because here's the thing. It may seem like all just political gamesmanship, and sitting in this chair, I look at it and go, this, what do you expect? This is what divided government has brought us. This is what the major ideological divide that has just ripped our country apart. This is what it's brought us to. There are almost seem to be nothing that we can agree on. There seems like there's almost nothing that we go, yeah, we should do that. You've got, and here's the problem. You've got this group of, and I don't even want to call them Republicans anymore, because I fear that the Republican Party has gone so far off the rails that, well, maybe we will, because they call themselves Republicans. They've taken their party that far off the deep end. These are radicals. These are people who don't believe in government at all, yet they're the ones wielding the power of we the people in their hands. And they have this, if I don't get my way, it's scorched earth. Not good for a country, not good for moving forward, and certainly not good for educating our children, not good for investing in our infrastructure, not good for our future. And that to me is really very troublesome. You look at the last 7 years, since President Obama took office, what really has gotten done? I mean, the first year and a half, the first 2 years, you got the Obamacare, you got the stimulus a little bit. And the stimulus, very small. I was saying at the time, and still say, it should have been much bigger, much chunkier, much more robust, much more in the realm of actually priming the pump. That shock to the system that gets everything going again. Let's say you're having a heart attack and they take those little paddle things and they go, give me the paddles. And they go, charge it up to 9 volts. And it just goes zip. That's kind of what we did. We went zip. Instead of going boom and, shocking you awake, we kind of zip, which is why we've had this long drawn out, why it's taken so long to turn this around. And it's really because you've got these voices who say, government can't do anything. Don't do it. And now we end up, years down the road where we can't even agree to fund education. Yet the voters here in Pennsylvania spoke overwhelmingly, with quite crystal clarity, that they wanted to fund public education. Yet you've got the people holding this up because they have their ideological aims. And at the end of this, we talked yesterday about the Chester Upland School District, and we'll talk about it again here in a minute or so. You have this situation where we don't have a budget. We have a school district that's broke because you've got laws that the public school haters and the commons haters have pursued, and masterfully, they did it. They pushed through laws with the help of Democrats to divide the public school and to drain it of its resources and to starve the beast. I mean, really, this is Grover Norquist on steroids. Starve the beast, I can drag it in the bathtub and drown it. This is what they've done. And it's playing out right before our very eyes. And now you can look at it and go, well, it's just the Chester Upland School District. Those are just poor people. Don't really care about them. Not going to bother us. Not going to bother me. It's not going to affect my kids. Yeah, it is. Those 4 Corbett years on education were just disastrous in this Commonwealth. Disastrous. Effects that we will feel for at least a generation. Put forth, proposed, pushed through, and voted on by the same people who are sitting there holding our Commonwealth hostage. Now, the governor has said we need to have a conversation. We need to talk this out. And I think that's a good thing. I think you should lock them in a room and they should not be able to come out until they're done. This isn't that difficult. But it is when you've taken these loyalty oaths, when you've taken these pledges not to raise taxes, when you've taken these pledges to never, even when you have to. This is what I always gave George H.W. Bush credit for. By today's standards, H.W. would be on the fringe of left. He'd be center left today, I believe. But he saw the situation. He said, look, you got to do what's responsible. You got to be the adult. And he raised taxes because he had to. He saw the numbers, had the books in front of him going, geez, this is bad. We should do something. And oh, no, silly man. Because that cost him the election in 92. More than that. I think what cost him the election in 92 was not so much the read my lips, even though that's the frame that everyone throws out because they want to make it that you're punished for doing the right thing. I don't think that was it. I think it was Ross Perot. Because there's no question Perot took more votes, in my view, from Bush than he did from Clinton. But look at where we're going as a Commonwealth. Look at the direction. You know, when 3/4 of the people in this country say we're heading in the wrong direction, maybe you should pay attention. When 88% of the people say that the Republican Congress is not doing their job, maybe we should pay attention. When you look at the polling here in Pennsylvania that points the finger squarely at our General Assembly for not getting a budget done, because the governor has continually put his hand out, only to have time and time again, it slapped away. And all the while, all this political theater is going on. All the while, all of the games and all of the press conferences where we have to have our code words and our buzzwords and our dog whistles and all of that, what's still not being done. And the sad thing is each side really, they're playing to their small base, while the rest of us are just kind of going, yeah, do your job. Would be nice, get it done, so that our kids can have funding for education, so that teachers in the Chester Upland School District don't have to vote to work for free. Do your job. The fact that they went home for summer, took a summer break, went away, everybody should be knocking on their doors in their districts going, why are you here? You're not done working. Go back. Get to work. And there's part of me that says we shouldn't even be paying them for that time. And you know me, I'm not someone who says people shouldn't get paid. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this. Will the private conversation happen? I don't know. It will be interesting to see how it comes out. It'll be interesting to hear how the pundit class complains about the lack of transparency. Now, this governor has been extremely transparent. And just to say that just saying that they want to have a private meeting, to me is a step in transparency. You could have just had it. So it'll be something worth watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it takes us. Anyway, today we're going to talk a little bit about education, a little bit about a little labor news. You know, like I said, Bernie on the march, and so much more. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Right back. Stick around.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, The year was 1885. White miners in Rock Spring, Wyoming, planned to wipe out the entire town's Chinese community. Chinese immigrants came to the United States looking for work, first in the California gold mines, then as laborers on the Transcontinental Railroad. Later, some worked for the Union Pacific-owned coal mines, including the one in Rock Springs. Union Pacific used racial animosity to divide its labor force. The company quashed the union at Rock Springs and only rehired 50 white miners. The other 150 miners were Chinese. And on this morning, 2 white miners went to the mines and beat 2 Chinese miners, 1 to death. A mob of 150 whites armed with rifles marched into Chinatown. The mob gave Chinese residents an hour to pack up and leave. However, after 30 minutes, some started shooting off their rifles. 1 Chinese miner was killed. The Chinese workers panicked and tried to flee. White rioters robbed, beat, and even killed the Chinese workers that they could catch. In a report to the New York Chinese consulate, Chinese survivors related some of the rioters would let a Chinese go after depriving him of all his gold and silver, while another would be beaten with the butt ends of the weapon before being let go. Some of the rioters would shoot a Chinese dead on the spot. Some stood by, shouting loudly and laughing and clapping their hands. That night, white rioters burned down every building in Chinatown. In all, 28 Chinese workers were killed. President Grover Cleveland sent in federal troops to quell the violence. In the aftermath, the Chinese workers did not want to return to work. Union Pacific did not want to lose its cheap labor force and forced their return to the mines. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. Just hours after his daughter, one of 2 journalists who worked for Roanoke, Virginia ABC affiliate station, was killed, Andy Parker announced on national television that he would make it his mission in life to get stronger gun laws passed. Colin Noir, a commentator and web series host for the NRA, who is the face of an NRA effort to influence a younger demographic, posted a video response to the tragedy.
To the parents of Allison Parker and Adam Ward, I have no right to tell any parent how to grieve for the loss of their child. Grief-inspired advocacy can be extremely effective and powerful, and I say run full speed to find a way to end violence like this. However, sometimes in a fight we can become so emotional, everyone and things starts looking like the enemy, even if they're there to help us.
That's right. Noir warned a grieving parent not to be so emotional, claiming that arguments in favor of stronger gun laws rely solely on emotions is a major strategy the NRA employs to try and shut down the debate over gun laws every time a shooting captures national headlines. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Stand for the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
So 2 Baptist preachers there in Texas, one in Houston, one in Dallas, they filed a lawsuit. The claim is that they could provide better education with the public's money than the public schools can, and that's why the state should give them and their religious schools all the money. In fact, in the brief, they ask, is the exclusion of religious schools based on religious bigotry? They say that under the test of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which I Not sure if that actually signed into law. They write there can be no compelling governmental interest in excluding them since private schools demonstrate that they can meet all of the secular requirements and diffusing the knowledge. Now, a bunch of religious people saying, whoa, that's a little too far for us. But I'm telling you, this is out there. And as these charter schools have diverted money away from the public schools, this is the next vein of it. And here to talk a little bit about this and also the insanity that's already begun in the Chester Upland School District, our good friend, attorney Irwin Aronson. Irwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back, Rick. Welcome home, and welcome back from your big trip. And good to be on the show again.
So here we are, beginning of the year. Chester Upland's already broke. I mean, they didn't even open the doors and they're broke.
Well, they didn't open the doors and they're broke because of a couple of very, very important reasons that are joining together and conspiring to really crush the public schools and the taxpayers and the educators, but most importantly, the children who live in the Chester Upland School District. One piece is one that's just ongoing, and it's affecting a number of public bodies and public service agencies and human service agencies across the state, and that is the ongoing budget problem, budget insolvency, if you will, in Pennsylvania, where we have just not had the legislature accomplish its job, its one constitutional job of adopting a budget in a timely fashion. The last year's budget expired on June 30th. And the General Assembly adopted a phony budget that Governor Wolf vetoed. So we are functioning without a budget, and that means that school districts are not getting funds, including the Chester Upland School District. Second, but very special at Chester Upland, is they are the victim of a pernicious charter school game where something roughly equal to half of the school district's entire annual budget is diverted from the children in the Chester Upland School District and is instead placed in the hands of a privateer that's running a charter school in the Chester Upland School District. And its performance is below that of all the public schools, and they won't reveal what they're spending on education versus what they're putting in their pockets. And then on top of all of that, they are engaged in a process that feathers their own nest. They seek out low demand, low maintenance special ed students and siphon off extra money from the school district, thereby leaving the school district with the most challenging of special ed students, who in turn on a per capita basis cost the school district more than the ones that have been creamed off of the top, if you will. So the following year, because of a peculiarity in the school district mandated, unfunded, state mandated financing of private charter schools with taxpayer money, is compelled to pay even more in the following year. And so that money is diverted away from public school students in the traditional public schools for the benefit of the charter operators who won't reveal what they're spending on education. So it's going on. And the saddest of all possible results, the kids who anticipated going back to school this week and have indeed started school, as I understand things out in that school district, are being taught by teachers who, in order to open the schools, have agreed to work without getting paid.
Yeah, we talked to them yesterday.
Yeah, our teachers, these are the people that, of course, get pilloried in that state capitol building and are assaulted by the Commonwealth Foundation and are demeaned and belittled by people like Senator Scott Wagner, who says we could just get rid of them and nobody would notice. Those people today in the Chester Upland School District, those heroes and heroines, and those leaders of children are leading by example by going to work with no prospect of being paid to make sure that the kids get an education and that school opened on time.
Yeah, and having the conversation we had with Daria Jackson yesterday, one of the teachers there, she said, it's been ongoing. The 4 years of the Corbett administration were just devastating to that school district, along with a whole bunch of other things. The fact that Pennsylvania is the most unequal state in the country when it comes to funding education, and there doesn't seem to be a rational funding formula in place. it puts poorer districts at a major disadvantage because property values are so low there.
Well, Pennsylvania does not even have an irrational school funding formula. It has no school funding formula. It's one of only a couple of states that has no statutory school funding formula, and the General Assembly and even Governor Corbett participated in appointing a special commission to look into this last year, and they came up with a report, and nothing's happened with it except that this budget battle that we have going on has resulted in the one thing that everybody had agreed can't happen, and that's the schools are getting even less money right now. But the Corbett administration, of course, laid the foundation for the terror that is now going on in the Chester-Upland School District. And it's not the only one. It's happening in Philadelphia. It's happening in Pittsburgh. It's happening in Wilkinsburg. It's happening in Duquesne. It's happening in West Mifflin. It's happening up in Scranton. It's happening over in Pittston. It's happening in Wilkes-Barre. It's happening in virtually every school district in the state, with the exception of a handful of very wealthy school districts that have a property tax base that in the short run can sustain these things. But it was the Corbett administration that made a sweetheart deal out in the Chester-Upland School District with former Governor Corbett's largest single contributor to confer upon him this unfunded mandate of transferring public school district funds in Chester-Upland school districts to private hands, and for that privateer to look in the eye of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania Office of Open Records and say, don't ask us questions about how we spent the taxpayers' money because it's proprietary and we don't want to release that.
And what's most egregious to me about this is, you hit on it a second ago, that, the charter schools have absolute certainty. They know how much money they're getting before the school year starts because they get paid first. So it doesn't matter how much money's in the pot, the charter schools get paid absolutely first. And if there's anything left over, then you have the ability to fund public education, which to me is, again, this is another one of those situations where it's apparent that this was set up specifically to wrestle control away from we the people and destroy public education.
I don't think there's any question about it. You just hit the nail on the head, right? And the special education funding formula is the sort of tail that wags the dog, if you will. The charters, as a matter of state funding formula imposed by the Charter School Act, but not funded at all by the state, requires that the sending school district, the public school district, the taxpayer-funded school district, pay the charters on a per capita basis what they spend on education for their students in the prior school year. But they divide it up between regular school students, and there's one number for that, and special ed students, and there's another number for that. So these charter schools take special ed students, but they don't take them all. The kids who are wheelchair bound and suffering from MD and have a plethora of other problems, from autism to cystic fibrosis to who knows what, and require the greatest amount of attention, are not sought by and not solicited by the charter operators. The kids who have dyslexia, the kids who may have a minor speech impediment or impairment who need to see a speech therapist once or twice a week, get over to the charter schools, and the charter schools are reimbursed the same dollar amount as the public schools have spent on average per capita special ed students. So those kids who end up in the charter schools are a cash cow, and that's how the charter operators look at them, not as wonderful students who have special needs and are special kids and should get special attention, but how can we maximize our income? The result of that is that what remains of the special children are most precious of the precious in the regular public school systems, in the traditional public schools. On a per capita basis cost more, so that next year when the charter operators do their next round of what the school systems are now referring to as creaming, by skimming off the top those special needs students who have the least demanding, if you will, the least expensive needs, who go to the charters, carry with them reimbursements that are 4 and 5 and 6 times what the non-special needs students carry with them from the public school districts. And that in turn increases the cost for the public school districts per capita yet again. And it lines the pockets of the privateers who are running the charters, and they come into the courtroom and have the colossal gall to suggest that they're underfunded. But don't ask us how we spend our money. Don't you dare ask us how we spend our money, or how much we invest per kid in education, or how much we actually spend on educating students versus building multi-million-dollar houses in Palm Beach, Florida.
I just read something the other day that said, in that district, to educate, just what you laid out, it's like $40,000 per student. And it's not even the kids that have the worst disabilities, because you could see that kids who have severe disabilities and really intensive needs, you could see maybe that it would be expensive. But as you pointed out, these aren't the extreme cases.
No, the extreme cases. Extreme in the sense of in need of the greatest amount of professional attention and personal assistance, are remaining in the school district run schools, and the charter operators are creaming the others off the top and taking the money with them, and it's just outrageous. And there is litigation right now. The Wolf administration, to its extraordinary credit, has challenged this funding formula. It's in the Court of Common Pleas in Delaware County now, where the Chester Upland School District operates, and hopefully there will be some success to reallocate these taxpayer funds. And we need to continue to remember, these are taxpayer funds. This is not money from on high, and this is not private tuition. This is taxpayer money that's diverted from its intended purpose, operating the public schools, and sent to the hands of these charter operators, who then claim that they have no right to, no mandate, if you will, to be accountable to anyone, that they're getting the money based on a formula, and how dare you question what we're doing with the money.
Jim sent me an email here as you're speaking, asking where is it stated that they don't have to tell what they spend their money on? I think he's asking the question on the charter schools, because I think most of us think that they're as transparent as they've got to put the books on the table. It's our tax dollars. We should know how it's spent, because I think that some bit of transparency with tax dollars should be on the table. Where is it so that they don't have to do that, and why aren't they?
Well, first of all, we have one of the realities. Public school districts have to publish a budget roughly in February for the upcoming year, that's subject to posting and comment by the public that funds those school districts. The charters don't have to do that. Second, we have a Pennsylvania right to know law, but it doesn't require that the charters just publish anything. You have to make a request. And the charters, as a group and as individual schools, have fought tooth and nail the disclosure of their financial positions and what they spend money on in the Office of Open Records, that is the agency created by the Pennsylvania Right to Know law, and ultimately in the Commonwealth Court. And they have said things like what I said to you, that they have suggested, for example, that their financial operations are proprietary in nature, and they should be protected from having to reveal that, simply because they're a private enterprise. They're not the public. That's how it goes, and that's the reality. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association is in the midst of a project. They have requested a great deal of information on the right to know law from every charter school and cyber charter school operating in the state, and they have had some that have cooperated and a massive number that haven't. Some have just ignored the request. Others have challenged things to try to slow down or delay or frustrate the process. And it's, at one level as a lawyer, very intriguing to watch, but at another level as a citizen and a taxpayer and as a parent of children and now a grandfather as well, I am just devastated by what this is doing to that basic foundational item of our country and its history and our democracy: access to an equal, free public education for all, high quality education, guaranteed by our state constitution, and now spurned because of this insanity of an unfunded mandate of private charter schools funded by public dollars.
And the thing that gets me is all the wasted money that goes into the legal fees and all of this wrangling and all of this stuff. That's money that should have gone into the classrooms.
Well, not only is that money that should have gone into the classrooms, but even of greater import, I think, from my humble perspective, is what we have seen these last several weeks moving up to the days when school starts, with the charter schools, and particularly the cyber charter schools, advertising on TV, on radio, indirect mail, on the internet, seeking to cull students away from the public schools and using taxpayer dollars for the advertising,
Yep.
as if the kids are Pepsodent toothpaste or Kellogg's cornflakes.
Well, I mean, it's even worse in Milwaukee, where they're giving $100 sign-on bonuses. We'll give you money if you bring one of your friends. The both of you'll get $100. I mean, it's just flat wrong.
Oh, it's wrong. It's insane. But this really cries out for meaningful reform. We should be having a legislature that says, you charter operators may not spend 1 cent of public money on advertising to solicit children away from other schools. You may not spend taxpayer money on litigation aimed at frustrating the taxpayers' access to their own information. You must not engage in contracts with people who are related to the school or to administrators and operators of the school. There must be transparency. If you're a charter operator or a charter administrator who violates these kinds of things, that you're barred from handling any public funds for a period of 5 or 10 years. There's a whole lot that we could do, but that's not happening.
And it's something that we've got.
And that's assuming the charters continue.
Something that we've got to get on the backs of our legislators about, and so.
Absolutely, and it's once we get past this budget battle, it should be job one.
All righty, Irwin, I appreciate you taking a little time for us talking about this, and I'm sure it's something we're going to revisit again and again as this school year goes on.
I hope so, and I appreciate getting the chance to talk about it with you today, and very happy to have you back in the saddle here in Pennsylvania instead of on the road, although I did get to enjoy those posts from your trip and that great civil rights tour. If I'm lucky, I get to be back on the show again next week.
We'll see you then. Thanks so much, Irwin.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
One thing to remember when you're climbing to the top, you'd better know the way back down. I can't believe you'd really stumble. And I always knew you'd fall. It seems so easy to say I knew you when I'd rather it was not at all.
We are not moving fast enough.
President Obama makes powerful case for climate action on the edge of the melting Arctic.
Amazing. At one point, we had 4 category hurricanes in the Pacific.
2015 hurricane season has now entered weird, record-breaking territory. Huge news for electric cars. Plus,
the guy saw that mountain when he was one of the first up there and named it after the president. No reason to change it.
right-wingers apoplectic over renaming of nation's tallest mountain.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You said, oh, Bill Maher, he's going to drag me through the mud. Yeah. First of all, you're in California. It hasn't rained in 4 years. There's no mud. Yeah.
It's true. There's no mud here in California. None. Zero. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you seem to be quite moved by the president's speech up in the Arctic.
Yeah, it was a very, very powerful speech, and I highly recommend listening to it. He was at the Glacier Conference in Alaska. He called for urgent and aggressive global action on climate change. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And with that background of melting glaciers and melting permafrost, Obama emphasized the need to act quickly or suffer the consequences.
The Arctic is the leading edge of climate change. It is happening here. It is happening now. And climate change is a trend that affects all trends. Economic trends, security trends, everything will be impacted.
And he was blunt about the consequences of continuing business as usual.
The fact is that climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it. We are not moving fast enough. If we were to abandon our course of action, if we stopped trying to build a clean energy economy and reduce carbon pollution, if we do nothing to keep glaciers from melting faster and oceans from rising faster and forests from burning faster and storms from growing stronger, we will condemn our children to a planet beyond their capacity to repair.
The Glacier Conference coincides with the United States taking its turn as leader of the Arctic Council. That's made up of all 8 countries that have territory in the Arctic, including Russia, which is now asserting even more territorial rights. Here in the U.S., environmental groups have called hypocrisy on Obama's approval of offshore oil drilling in the fragile Arctic, which will release even more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Did the president speak to that apparent contradiction, decrying climate change, even after he's approved drilling in the otherwise pristine Arctic?
No, but Obama administration officials have previously said that their focus is to balance the needs of competing stakeholders, and we still need that oil, so that justifies drilling.
Okay.
Right-wing media, meanwhile, are apoplectic over Obama's announcement to restore the original Native American name to the nation's tallest mountain. Mount McKinley, named for early 20th century President William McKinley, who never actually visited it, was named by a gold prospector, a white guy. McKinley died in office a short time later. Now the mountain will be called what it has been called for thousands of years, Denali.
It's hysterical because Alaska is completely in favor of this. The only ones who seem to be furious about it are the right-wingers and the folks from Ohio, including Republican Senator Rob Portman, who said the mountain was named for President McKinley out of respect following his assassination. Newsflash for Republican U.S. Senator from Ohio, Rob Portman: the mountain was named Mount McKinley years before McKinley was killed.
Meanwhile, for the first time in recorded history, on Saturday, there were a record 3 simultaneous typhoons, all Category 4, churning in the eastern and central Pacific Ocean. Just to keep that in perspective, until this year, there had been only 3 hurricanes total in that region since 1950. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that the Pacific Ocean is currently warmer than it has ever been in recorded history. And over in the Atlantic Ocean, newly formed Hurricane Fred is the farthest east a hurricane has ever formed off the coast of Africa, and it has generated the first ever hurricane warning for the Cape Verde Islands. The first ever in history. Finally, big news for the car industry. Electric car maker Tesla has again achieved the highest possible rating from Consumer Reports, 103 on a 100-point scale, the only car ever to do so. And BMW has announced that it is going all electric. Within 10 years, it will build only electric plug-in hybrid cars, converting its entire fleet in anticipation of stricter carbon emissions laws as the world transitions to clean energy.
Every BMW will be electric or hybrid in one way or another.
Yep.
In 10 years.
Yep, it's happening.
It's happening. For much more on all of these stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It is happening here. It is happening now.
Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Right here, right now. And it's the only place I want to be.
If the only choice available were public schools, we'd have better public schools. But the wealthy in many, many cities have opted out of the public school system. I mean, they may vote for the bond issues out of conscience, and some of them may engage philanthropically. But with their own kids, they send them to private schools. And by having this division, essentially between rich and poor in schools, the rich get the education they want to get for their kids, and a lot of them have a conscience, so they try to do something for somebody else, but they don't try the same way as they would as if the kids were in those schools.
When I've been working in a coal mine, going down, working in a coal mine, about to slip down, working in a coal mine.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Warren Buffett speaking the truth, even if the profiteers don't want him to. And look, he's a guy who's investing in the charters. He's investing in these because that's what the hedge fund managers see as the next or as the place to make money. When the Warren Buffetts and the Mike Bloombergs and the Bill Gates and all of them throw their money into it, you got to go. They understand return on investment. They get it. And look, they may have some philanthropic ideals, but at the end of the day, it's about the control. And I go back to this story in Texas, where you've got these religious groups going, "Hey, we want the money. We want the money so we can put it into our pockets." And you got to kind of wonder about this. You kind of got to wonder where we're going. I just saw an op-ed written by a representative from Wisconsin, a guy named Chris Taylor, congressman there. He points out that ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and we've all heard of ALEC and their corporate control and their dominance, where the policies that they push and their model legislation. But Chris Taylor, the congressman there from Wisconsin, writes, ALEC and its members, including the American Federation for Children, who can be against children, he says, have become more powerful than other citizens' voices at the state capitol. Despite massive public urging from Wisconsin school superintendents, principals, teachers, parents, and students for consistent and adequate K-12 public education funding, Republican legislators chose to dump more money into an unaccountable private voucher system. They've almost moved entirely to the voucher system, which, is just, here's a golden ticket. Go see where you can go with it. Now in Wisconsin, he says, since Republicans took over in 2011, they have cut $1.2 billion from public's K-12 education. Now here in Pennsylvania, that number is exponentially higher because you think the first year they cut $1 billion, then they cut a little bit more, then they cut a little bit more, but that $1 billion compounds over the next 3 years, over the entire term. Just because you cut it once doesn't mean it goes back the next year. It's now cut permanently. In Wisconsin, they've cut $1.2 billion. I would argue we cut about $3.5 billion over the Corbett term. He says under this latest budget, 55% of the school districts will get less general student aid than they did in the last budget cycle, and that Wisconsin is spending over $1,000 less per student, less than they did in 2008. And he says, yet the private school special interests, this budget was like Christmas morning, with presidents that blew the student enrollment caps off the statewide private school voucher program, diverted an additional up to $800 million from public schools over the next decade, and increased the per pupil spending in the state's private voucher system more than even Governor Walker wanted. And then he says the cherry on the top was the last minute late night passage of the special needs voucher program, which funds private schools for special needs students without actually requiring specialized instruction, teacher training, or current legal protections. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all those kids who have special needs, we're going to round them up, we're going to put them into charter schools or voucherized schools, or who knows, eventually religious schools, and there'll be no one there to teach them. They'll just be warehoused. But they'll be the cash cow. They'll be the cream of the economic crop, because, like in the Chester Upland District, $40,000 per student. Think about that for a second. And what's interesting to me is now ALEC is out there pushing this idea of, well, the vouchers and the those aren't just for poor kids. No, they're for you middle income people. You working stiffs who want to see your kids go to those really good prep schools and those really good private schools that are like $40,000 a year. And I go back to this because I think this is important. I said this from the beginning. The sale was eventually going to come around to the working class of this country to go, oh, you want the best for your kid, right? Oh, well, we've got the chance. It's this golden ticket. This golden ticket that's going to give you the chance to, I don't know, maybe get your kid into one of those private schools. And I had on the program, State Senator, what was his name? The crazy guy from Lebanon. Oh, come on. Mike Fulmer. That's it. Thank you. I had Mike Fulmer on the program. And I asked him point blank, because he's a big supporter of all of this. And I said, Mike, tell me, if this goes through and we get these wonderful, wonderful things called vouchers, once I have this in my hot little hands, can I send my kids to the Abington Friends School down in Philadelphia? Can I send them down to Germantown Academy down in Philadelphia? Can I send them to any of the private schools I want? And he said to me, yes, you can. I'm going, whoa. You say that again? And he said, yeah, absolutely. You have the ability to go to any of those schools. And I said, it'll pay it entirely, right? Oh, yeah, pay it entirely. That's not even close to reality. And I got to be honest, I was stunned when he said it, because it showed that he didn't really understand what he was pushing, other than this visceral hatred of public education and public schools. And I argue it comes from an ideological place. You've got these people who have been just so trained and browbeaten into public bad, private good, that it doesn't matter what we do, it's always going to be bad. And this is what has happened of 30 years of destructive, deceptive messaging. This is what's happened with all of the right-wing money being pushed into divisiveness and attacking education and teachers. It's amazing in my lifetime how quickly we have gone down this path of really just going, yep, screw it, take it all. Just bizarre stuff to me. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Dear little boy of mine, what did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that Washington never told a lie. I learned that soldiers seldom die. I learned that everybody's free. That's what the teacher said to me, and that's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school.
Occasionally, I see something that is so bizarre, so out of place, so wrong, that I have to assume I'm hallucinating. For example, the National Park Service's Pullman National Monument in Chicago. George Pullman? My mind boggled. Our tax dollars are being spent to build a national park in tribute to a narcissistic, paternalistic, brutalistic 19th century robber baron. Yes, Pullman, a notorious union buster and exploiter of working families, is having his history mythologized by today's powers that be, portraying him as a model of the corporate order's historic virtue. At the February 19 official consecration of Pullman's Park, Chicago's thoroughly corporatized mayor, Rahm Emanuel, even gushed, "This will be a monument to Pullman's role in building the American dream." Sure, Your Honor, dream as in nightmare. Over 5,000 workers toiled in Pullman factories making rail cars, including the luxury Palace Sleeper for elite train travel. He condescendingly referred to these workers as his children. But what a dysfunctional father! In the hard winter of 1894, this feudal lord of the manor abruptly slashed his children's meager wages by some 25%, leaving many unable to pay rent and feed their families. Thus came the historic Pullman strike that quickly spread nationwide, led by the union icon Eugene Debs. No problem for Lord George, though. He and other railroad royals rushed to the White House and got President Grover Cleveland to dispatch the U.S. Army to crush the labor rebellion. 30 workers were killed, Debs was arrested on a trumped-up conspiracy charge, and all laborers who had joined the strike were fired and blacklisted. This is Jim Hightower saying, the only way that Pullman National Monument can have any legitimacy is to strew the grounds with sculptures of the 30 dead workers he killed.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by Ask Me Council 13.
Lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing while workers unite.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Let's go to the phone lines. Got someone who disagrees with me on the privatized school thing. What's on your mind there, buddy?
Good day, sir. How you doing?
Yep, make your point.
Oh, good man. Just saying, privatizing anything is actually going to get a better result.
Absolutely not. Flat wrong. Again, this mantra of we're going to privatize everything and it's all going to give me one example of something we've privatized that's actually been less costly and actually benefited we the people. Give me one thing.
I can tell you this about private schools because we haven't privatized everything yet. Everything seems to be run by the government.
Again, give me something we've privatized.
I'm going to tell you something right now.
Tell me.
You go to healthcare, the VA, the Veterans Administration runs a despicable organization run through the government, and we treated our soldiers horribly in these hospitals. They're run down and they're nasty. You go to a private hospital, you're going to get much better treatment. And that's just one example.
That's because we've defunded the VA over the last 30 years.
Hardly. No, we're throwing tons of money at the VA. It's horrible. We need to put more money into that. You're exactly right.
I'm right there with you. So why aren't we doing it?
I can only tell you, talk about education here. Being a student of private and public schools, I can tell you, by the time I hit 5th grade in private school, a Catholic school, I could have gone to high school in a public school, and I did after by 8th grade, and I could pretty much float through there because of education. I mean, we sat in a room with the 30 the same kids every year through that school, and we taught every subject by one little nun every year. She taught history, language, penmanship, all the subjects straight through. You go to public schools, I mean, literally, you could have a specialized teacher for every subject. In kindergarten, in 1st grade, it's a completely inefficient system. The idea that a profit means bad education to me is horrible. I think profit is the best way to get a good education.
Now that's where we're going to. I absolutely don't buy into the whole we're going to give money to the profiteers and it's the only way we're going to get an education for our kids. And I fundamentally disagree with you on the points of that maybe you personally did really well moving through Catholic school and did really well. Our public schools work very efficiently and the teachers do a fantastic job. I know you like to rail on that frame and I know you like to push that out, but that is just not it. I'm sorry. Not going to let you go there. But I appreciate the thoughts anyway.
Oh, I got me more time. I'll go on.
No, you've said your piece. I got you. I think you're wrong, though. Thanks so much for the call, though. But here's the thing, and this is what bothers me. You get this frame that, the public schools are inefficient. They're not. They're underfunded. We're continually putting more and more kids into a classroom and heaping more responsibility on top of them. And by the way, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Appreciate the thought. I just think that you're wrong. I think that public education is, when we fund it right, I think it is a thorough and efficient way to educate our kids. Now, some people do. They have, I was one of them. I went to a Catholic school as well. I thought I got a very good education, but I got a very good education in the public school as well. Let's take a quick break right here at top of the hour. Back after this.
And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Solidarity in Steel, as thousands of United Steelworkers members hit the streets of Pittsburgh Tuesday. The rally in March called for fair labor contract settlements with U.S. Steel, Allegheny Technologies Incorporated, and ArcelorMittal. Rallies also happened in Chicago and Burns Harbor, Indiana. The two master contracts expire at midnight Tuesday. The master agreements in the steel industry cover about 30,000 workers. ATI locked out 2,200 USW members at 12 locations August 15th after several months of bargaining. That contract expired June 30th. Steelworker Jeremy Williamson told a local Pittsburgh TV station the fight for a fair steel contract is unifying the workers.
It's brought us together. We're probably going to have well over 1,000 or 2,000 people here today, if not more. It sounds like it's going to be bigger than last time. Just glad to be part of it.
OSHA says there were safety violations that factored in the death of Kenneth LaChance, a maintenance manager at Waukesha Iron and Metal in Wisconsin. OSHA is proposing penalties of $42,000 for the 11 safety violations found by OSHA investigators. OSHA says the company didn't require head protection, didn't safely handle compressed gas cylinders, and forklifts were unsafe. The company also failed to adequately train workers to use forklifts. LaChance was killed operating a forklift without a helmet while trying to hoist an oxygen sensor. Christine Zortman, OSHA's area director in Milwaukee, says common sense safety precautions should always be priority one on any work site. The Florida-based Coalition of Immokalee Workers has made major strides in its campaign for fair food to change horrendous working conditions for farm workers in America's produce fields. September 10th through the 13th, their Student Farm Worker Alliance is meeting to launch back-to-school escalation plans in their Wendy's student boycott and to build strength and solidarity across grassroots movements for justice. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers, Gerardo Reyes Chavez, says that the Fair Food Campaign, getting fast food and grocery stores to pay a little more to ensure justice for workers in their supply chains, is resonating nationwide.
This is a time in which conscious consumers are asking for the same thing that we started to ask many years back when we started this fight: to be respected, to be paid a dignified wage. And for the first time, things are changing. And we don't have to give up our dignity when we go to work in the fields.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and from the United Auto Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right.
So as I understand it, this Friday in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders going to be taken to the picket line. And I'm still waiting for President Obama to put on those comfortable shoes and walk the picket line as he said he would do as candidate Obama in 2008. I waited for him in 2011 while we were in Wisconsin, sleeping on the floor of the Capitol. I've waited for him a while to stand up and take out into the picket line. Bernie Sanders evidently going to do this on Friday, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to reach out to the folks at the BCTGM to talk about what's going on there in Cedar Rapids with this informational picket at the Penford Products Factory there in Cedar Rapids of this in Gieterond. I don't know. We'll find out. I've got Ron Baker on the line. He's the strategic campaign coordinator over there at the BCTGM. Ron, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks, Rick, for having me on. I certainly appreciate it.
Say this again before me. Say it once.
Ingredion.
There you go.
And we like to say it with two E's. Ingreed, or G-R-E-E, but the corporate name is with one, but we use it with two.
So I understand on August the 1st, a contract expired. You guys are working without a contract as you work through this. And on Friday, Bernie's coming out to march with you.
Bernie will be at at an informational picket line, as well as many supporters from not only from Local 100G, which are the members that are impacted by this bargaining in Cedar Rapids, but also from other BCTGM locals, the Hawkeye Labor Council, the Iowa Federation of Labor, and a whole host of people will be there. Bernie's going to show up, Rick, about 5:15. He's going to walk the picket line, and he's also going to make a statement to the press about what's going on in the country and how this is an example of some of the things that the corporations are doing to workers.
I had a conversation this morning over breakfast with a friend who said, because he's gonna meet Bernie at one of his events coming up soon, and he goes, "What should I ask him? Should I ask him how he's going to save the middle class?" And I said, "I think what he's doing on Friday is how we save the middle class."
Exactly. Well, Bernie Sanders is not afraid to walk a picket line, not afraid to say how it is, not afraid to say how the 1% is actually benefiting from not only production increases but also profits, while the other 95% of the country don't gain on any avenue.
And we keep hearing this frame that, the corporate interests are going to take care of things. If we give them all the money, all the power, all the control, things will be just fine. And yet that really hasn't happened.
Yeah, I remember, and so do you, the days of the trickle-down economics. I mean, those trickle-down economics didn't work then. They don't work now. We saw even in the recovery, or what's perceived to be the recovery since 2008, corporations made tremendous profits, and it was supposed to be, they create tremendous opportunities for employment, but that didn't happen either.
Because it's been 30 years of indoctrination that everything should be privatized, everything in the hands of the handful, and that the rest of us, we scurry for the crumbs. At some point, that's got to be turned around. And I think a guy like Bernie can begin that movement, help begin that movement to get people, maybe get their heads right again.
Well, he's lived his life, he's lived his life practicing what he believes, and he says what he believes. Ingredion came to actually bought Penford products in early this year or late last year, and part of their foray into the Cedar Rapids area was that here we are, we're a corporation. They have 11,000 employees, and they're a global corporation. They're a multinational. But, they pride themselves on ethics and morals and whatever, and it's in their mission statement. But as soon as they came to town, and the first contract proposals that came down was like 125 different changes to the agreement those folks had worked under for decades.
Yeah, I mean, as I was looking at the company, I guess it's been in that area, since 1890?
1890, it started out as the Douglas Starch Works in Cedar Rapids, and there's been 2 or 3 or 4 generations of people that have worked there family-wise.
And you look at this and you go, the radical change that we've seen in the destruction of the America that I think my generation, at least, we grew up thinking would be there, that there'd be some stability in the community, that there were names that were there that would be there for the next generation. That hasn't worked out so much.
No, I like to term it as these corporations are all racing to get their deal done, to take it either to lower wage countries or to minimize the wages and benefits of people that have worked for them for years. But, ultimately, we know, Rick, that, these corporations will kill the goose that laid the golden egg, the American economy, the American worker, the American worker's work ethic, and all those things that made this country what it is today, just absolutely hammering on every element of that to the point that, we consume 25 to 30% of the world's products. And when this economy cannot support itself any longer due to stuff like this, it won't matter whether you make a product for 10 cents or $10, there'll be nobody there to buy it.
Yeah, if you don't have any money, it doesn't matter how cheap the prices are.
That's right, exactly.
But what gets me is, to me, one of the biggest problems we have facing us now is this income inequality, that there are so many people who are working harder and harder, longer and longer, and just falling behind. I use myself as the example. I remember when I started in the freight industry, I was making $15 an hour a quarter a century ago with a healthcare credit, with a pension credit. People doing that exact job today are making like $13.
Yes.
With no healthcare and with no pension. You go, what happened? And this isn't economic gimmickry. This is 25 years ago. Somebody was making $15 an hour with healthcare and a pension. Today, 13 and no healthcare and no pension.
Yes, and then there's got to be an end to it. I mean, if there's no end to it, then there'll be an end to the economy in this country and working opportunities and family sustaining wages and benefits that will no longer be. I'll give you a good example, Rick. I mean, here's a woman that runs this corporation. Her name is Eileen Gordon. And she used to work for Rio Tinto and Alcan in, I believe, in France or whatever. She becomes a CEO here. Here's a corporation that's trying to hammer these people in Cedar Rapids that not only work in a dangerous profession, but also make considerable profits for the corporation. She last year made $7.3 million, and she has a golden parachute of $28 million. So if she ever does a bad job and they do fire her, she'll walk out the door with $28 million.
Now, how do I get that?
Well, not many people in this country can get that, and that goes back to the whole 1% taking all the gravy off the table and leaving the other 99% to fend for themselves.
But you hear that we've been trained to, like Pavlovian dogs, to go, oh, it's the free market. The free market's wonderful. This is just the free market, Ron. Deciding that she works harder and she's smarter and better than the rest of us, she should take it all, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly their philosophy, but if you think about it, I mean, if those 1,500 or 1,800 CEOs across the country running all the major corporations take all the profit and all the prosperity that's generated by people that work, I mean, it's not long before this economy can no longer sustain it.
I love the ridiculous argument, but we need them, Ron. Without them, we would just be standing around looking at each other.
Well, we've all heard the old saying that if you divided all the money in the world up and left 30 years go by, the same people would have the same amount of wealth. Well, the only reason for that is because those particular people, and the laws in this country and the way the system works in this country benefits that 1% rather than the 99, right?
Somebody sent me an interesting one of those little infographics of how rich people think that they got rich and how they actually got rich, and it's in how they look at themselves. They have a can-do attitude and they work hard. They're just sure gumption and intestinal fortitude. They willed themselves to success, and then you look at how they really got it. Yep. Most of it is the merciless exploitation of the working class, and the other half they inherited it.
Right. Well, if you look at the situation in Ingredion, which is the Penford products that they had just bought, I mean, this place produces industrial starches for the paper industry and produces millions of gallons of ethanol every year. Now, these are very, very profitable operations, but they send they send their HR person in from Indianapolis, and he sits down, he's got his marching orders, and I'll give you an example. They did not intend to bargain in good faith anyway, because a month before the bargaining started, they moved trailers onto the property with bunks and whatever in there to intimidate the people, to say, you're going to take what we give you, or we're going to lock you out and replace you.
Jeez. That's to me, that's what it's become. I mean, you look at all of these lockouts, there are no more strikes anymore. Right. Everything is lockouts. All of these employers saying, you take what we give you or we're kicking you to the curb, and we'll bring scabs in. And here's the thing that gets me is we don't look at scabs today like we did 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. And I've told the story a number of times. As a kid growing up, my grandfather said, you don't play with that kid across the street. And I never asked why until about, I was about 20, and I said, what was that about? Turns out the guy who was the grandfather had crossed a picket line like 50 years ago when the railroad was on strike, and nobody talked to him. Right. He was completely ostracized by society. Yep.
That's
Yet
right.
Now in Pittsburgh, you've got this ATI company putting advertisements all over the place, bringing scabs in for $3,000 a week to work 84 hours a week.
Yep.
And they're going to get people.
Well, I tell you, it's hard to convince folks that have that mentality that if they're going into work for 10, there's a $9 crowd that'll take their job right after that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I mean, the American worker, we all know this over time, the American worker produced greater productivity and profits with less newer tools than the rest of the world for decades. And the steel industry speaks to that. The baking industry speaks for that. The mining industry speaks for that. and a lot of other industries. And this situation that Bernie's going to be at and going to address on Friday at Ingredion, I'm sure that he is going to hit every single point when it comes to why it takes good wage-earning jobs and family-sustaining jobs in order to support an economy, not just jobs that barely get you by.
So does this mean that Hillary's going to be in tow behind him?
I don't know. I understand that Hillary Clinton's going to be at the Hawkeye Labor Council picnic on Labor Day, so I guess you could say 3 days behind them.
Yeah, but not walking the picket line with your members.
Bernie will be there.
Yeah. Okay. Any chance BCTGM is going to endorse Bernie, or is that above your pay grade?
That's about. I do not make that decision, my friend.
Oh, there you go. I wish you guys nothing but the best there, and I hope that this stuff with Ingredion works itself out. You guys get across the table and hammer this out so it doesn't get ugly.
Thanks, Rick, for everything you do and everything you've done, pal.
Thanks so much, Ron. Ron Baker, he's the strategic coordinator there at the BCTGM, the Bakery and Confectionery Workers. Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1885. White miners in Rock Spring, Wyoming, planned to wipe out the entire town's Chinese community. Chinese immigrants came to the United States looking for work, first in the California gold mines, then as laborers on the Transcontinental Railroad. Later, some worked for the Union Pacific-owned coal mines, including the one in Rock Springs. Union Pacific used racial animosity to divide its labor force. The company quashed the union at Rock Springs and only rehired 50 white miners. The other 150 miners were Chinese. And on this morning, 2 white miners went to the mines and beat 2 Chinese miners, 1 to death. A mob of 150 whites armed with rifles marched into Chinatown. The mob gave Chinese residents an hour to pack up and leave. However, after 30 minutes, some started shooting off their rifles. 1 Chinese miner was killed. The Chinese workers panicked and tried to flee. White rioters robbed, beat, and even killed the Chinese workers that they could catch. In a report to the New York Chinese consulate, Chinese survivors related some of the rioters would let a Chinese go after depriving him of all his gold and silver, while another would be beaten with the butt ends of the weapon before being let go. Some of the rioters would shoot a Chinese dead on the spot. Some stood by, shouting loudly and laughing and clapping their hands. That night, white rioters burned down every building in Chinatown. In all, 28 Chinese workers were killed. President Grover Cleveland sent in federal troops to quell the violence. In the aftermath, the Chinese workers did not want to return to work. Union Pacific did not want to lose its cheap labor force and forced their return to the mines. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the disappearance of William Morgan that ignited the first third-party movement in American politics. The most credible explanation for what became of Mr. Morgan was that he was drowned in the Niagara River by a group of Masons. News of the alleged murder spread quickly across the country. At the same time, a vast segment of the U.S. citizenry believed that the Masons were a corrupt, elitist secret society and should be purged from the many public offices they held. Morgan's alleged murder was all it took to trigger a ferocious anti-Mason movement. Opposition to Masonry was taken up by churches as a religious crusade, and some churches condemned Freemasonry. Politicians saw an opportunity also. The politics of most of the 1820s and 30s was a battle between John Quincy Adams supporters and Democrats that followed Andrew Jackson. Join us again for a third political party. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Wow, bunch of email stuff since the conversation with the privatizer. And look, here's the thing. I hate getting phone calls right before the break because you got to take that top of the hour break. I would have liked to have fleshed it out a little bit more. But here's the thing. Susan wrote an email saying, I heard your conversation with the guy pimping privatization. Wish you would have kept him longer. There are many situations where private education is better, but it has nothing to do with the teacher. It's about active, engaged parents. It's about socioeconomic class. It's about the parents. And Susan, I agree with that to a point. Jim had a problem with the caller's take on the VA. In fact, several emails from folks saying that the VA does a fantastic job. Some of the things being blown out of proportion. And look, I'm not getting into all of that because I don't actually know all the details. I know what I've read about the scheduling problems, which are, in my view, despicable. It comes down to funding, though. And this idea that we're just throwing money at it. Look at the budgets. The budgets have almost stayed the same during a time of war, and you don't increase it afterwards. Just flat wrong. But here's the thing. So I got a chance to go back on this education thing. Private schools do a little bit better when you've got motivated parents who are, paying the tuition and making sure that their kids get all the things that they need and are active participants. To me, that's the major difference. The education that I got, because I went to Catholic school and I went to public school. The education I got in Catholic school was not any better or any worse than what I got in public schools. The difference is that I knew the kid next to me and on the other side of me, their parents are going to kick their behinds too if they didn't do well. There was that incentive from home that sometimes isn't there in the public schools. And there's a plethora of reasons for that. And you go back to what Buffett said, and this is what I've always believed. What's happening right now is we're seeing the separation where the motivated parents who can get their kids through all of these loopholes and through all of these things are going to be able to do that, and they're just abandoning the public schools. Whereas in the past, they were the ones who were there fighting and making sure that everyone got a good education. See, to me, education is a societal good. If we have a segment of the population that doesn't get a good education, a segment of the population that falls behind, we're going to have to carry them. And this is where my conservative friends should really be outraged that we've defunded the only opportunity these kids are going to have to get ahead and to be self-sustaining members of society and basically just chattel for the prison industrial complex. We should be outraged by what's going on. The fact that we don't have a budget, the fact that these legislators have just run off. Now, the theory, and I've had these conversations numerous times about the privatization of education. There's this idea, and we've been trained to think that corporate education, that the for-profit education, that's the way to go. I fundamentally disagree with that. We have educated generations of kids without the corporate model. That's how we got here, right? We have educated our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. We have done this. We don't know. We were innovative. We were entrepreneurial. All of those things came out of our public education system. What's happening right now is we're defunding the public part for the private part. And this is what worries me, because we are really creating, you go back to 2004 in the John Edwards frame of two Americas. We are really creating that on a mass scale. And education going to be that defining line. Healthcare, that defining line. Retirement security, that defining line. The haves and the have-nots. And what's frustrating to me is we almost have been trained to the point to where it's an automatic censor. We just immediately say private better, without any real documentation or fact to back it up. Is the private parking system any better than the public one was? Ask anyone in Harrisburg, ask anyone in Pittsburgh, ask anyone in Chicago. No. Is the privatization of just about anything the electricity, has that gotten us better service? Has it gotten us better rates? No. And you could go down the list. Just because there's a profit motive doesn't matter. Doesn't mean it's going to be a better service for we the people. It's just going to mean it's going to be more profitable. And they're going to squeeze every dollar and every cost out of the system. It's not about producing products anymore. And that's the fundamental misunderstanding, that people think, well, we got to build the widget. No. It's about squeezing profit out, because we now have to pander to the investors. And I don't want education turning into the same thing. Just don't. I think it would be horribly destructive. And then we go back to those days of segregation, and not based on race or color or any of that, but based on who has the ability to navigate the system, who has the ability to jump over the hurdles. And understand, the vouchers that are being proposed, they don't cover the Abington Friends School or the Germantown Academy. They cover portions. So this, again, is more redistribution of wealth to those with the means, and not your kids and mine. I'd be interested in your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We are not moving fast enough.
President Obama makes powerful case for climate action on the edge of the melting Arctic.
Amazing. At one point, we had 4 category hurricanes in the Pacific.
2015 hurricane season has now entered weird, record-breaking territory. Huge news for electric cars. Plus,
The guy saw that mountain when he was one of the first up there and named it after the president. No reason to change it.
right-wingers apoplectic over renaming of nation's tallest mountain.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You said, oh, Bill Maher, he's going to drag me through the mud. Yeah. First of all, you're in California. It hasn't rained in 4 years. There's no mud. Yeah.
It's true. There's no mud here in California. None. Zero. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you seem to be quite moved by the president's speech up in the Arctic.
Yeah, it was a very, very powerful speech, and I highly recommend listening to it. He was at the Glacier Conference in Alaska. He called for urgent and aggressive global action on climate change. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And with that background of melting glaciers and melting permafrost, Obama emphasized the need to act quickly or suffer the consequences.
The Arctic is the leading edge of climate change. It is happening here. It is happening now. And climate change is a trend that affects all trends. Economic trends, security trends, everything will be impacted.
And he was blunt about the consequences of continuing business as usual.
The fact is that climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it. We are not moving fast enough. If we were to abandon our course of action, if we stop trying to build a clean energy economy and reduce carbon pollution, if we do nothing to keep glaciers from melting faster and oceans from rising faster and forests from burning faster and storms from growing stronger, we will condemn our children to a planet beyond their capacity to repair.
The Glacier Conference coincides with the United States taking its turn as leader of the Arctic Council. That's made up of all 8 countries that have territory in the Arctic, including Russia, which is now asserting even more territorial rights. Here in the U.S., environmental groups have called hypocrisy on Obama's approval of offshore oil drilling in the fragile Arctic, which will release even more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Did the president speak to that apparent contradiction, decrying climate change, even after he's approved drilling in the otherwise pristine Arctic?
No, but Obama administration officials have previously said that their focus is to balance the needs of competing stakeholders, and we still need that oil, so that justifies drilling.
Okay.
Right-wing media, meanwhile, are apoplectic over Obama's announcement to restore the original Native American name to the nation's tallest mountain. Mount McKinley, named for early 20th century President William McKinley, who never actually visited it, was named by a gold prospector, a white guy. McKinley died in office a short time later. Now the mountain will be called what it has been called for thousands of years, Denali.
It's hysterical because Alaska is completely in favor of this. The only ones who seem to be furious about it are the right-wingers and the folks from Ohio, including Republican Senator Rob Portman, who said the mountain was named for President McKinley out of respect following his assassination. Newsflash for Republican U.S. Senator from Ohio, Rob Portman: the mountain was named Mount McKinley years before McKinley was killed.
Meanwhile, for the first time in recorded history, on Saturday, there were a record 3 simultaneous typhoons, all Category 4, churning in the eastern and central Pacific Ocean. Just to keep that in perspective, until this year, there had been only 3 hurricanes total in that region since 1950. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that the Pacific Ocean is currently warmer than it has ever been in recorded history. And over in the Atlantic Ocean, newly formed Hurricane Fred is the farthest east a hurricane has ever formed off the coast of Africa, and it has generated the first ever hurricane warning for the Cape Verde Islands. The first ever in history. Finally, big news for the car industry. Electric car maker Tesla has again achieved the highest possible rating from Consumer Reports, 103 on a 100-point scale, the only car ever to do so. And BMW has announced that it is going all electric. Within 10 years, it will build only electric plug-in hybrid cars, converting its entire fleet in anticipation of stricter carbon emissions laws as the world transitions to clean energy.
Every BMW will be electric or hybrid in one way or another.
Yep.
In 10 years.
Yep, it's happening.
It's happening. For much more on all of these stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It is happening here. It is happening now.
Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Right here, right now. There is no other place I want to be. Working class heroes, they all
This is an interesting little thing that came across my desk. As you know, Verizon is in contract talks with their union CWA, and there's been some back and forth. Their CEO puts a good bit of coin in his pocket. Lowell McAdams, about $18 million he puts into his pocket, which and only has access to one corporate jet. Now there's a GoFundMe account to help fund the corporate executives because, look, Verizon only made $1 billion in profit every month. Their top executives only pocket about $250 million in wages over the last 5 years. They need some help because they're going to the bargaining table saying, hey, we need concessions, massive concessions. So what the good folks at Verizon have done, the workers have done, is they're going to start a GoFundMe account so we can all help. And maybe it's not a bad idea. Maybe we can help them get over that $250 million over 5 years and maybe get it right to that nice even number of $1 billion. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about labor news. And when we do that, we always talk with our friend Doug Cunningham, Workers Independent News. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, as always, good to be with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
So what do you think? Should we be funding the Lowell McAdams of the world? I mean, only $250 million over the last 5 years the executives there have pocketed.
Oh, yeah, just $250 million. Man, I feel their pain, you know what I mean? And it's just incredible. At Verizon, for example, I mean, they've profited hugely in this company, and they're still coming after the workers. I mean, $9.6 billion is what they made, I think, in 2014. They're projected to be on track to about the same profit this year. And there are 39,000 workers there represented by CWA and IBEW trying to talk to them at the bargaining table to get a reasonable contract. And what's happening? Well, these Verizon folks with their $250 million in compensation for the execs, they're coming after the workers and want to dismantle some of their job security. They want to take away some of their health care. They want to take away the actual pension, defined benefit pensions. I mean, it's just incredible, Rick, to me, to sit here and witness in my seat as a reporter covering national labor news for Workers Independent News for 12 years now, to watch over and over again these companies do the same basic thing. I mean, they pull the same page out of the playbook just about every time they sit down. They're always coming after workers and their wages and their benefits. And it's madness, and it's greedy. It's just plain greed, and it's wrong. And these unions are trying to take a stand against it.
And I give them credit for that. But, it's kind of just, it's part of the playbook. And now it's no longer about worrying about strikes. It's lockouts. And in Pittsburgh, there's a huge lockout. Yesterday, they had a big rally and march there to highlight the fact that this ATI company has locked out some 2,200 workers. And they're seeking scabs all across the Commonwealth and all across the area to come in and take these guys' jobs.
Workers are being disrespected on a massive level by both corporations and their political puppets, and it's just sickening to watch. It is morally wrong, morally bankrupt, and it's just absolutely ridiculous as well. Because working people in this country deserve a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They deserve respect on the job, and instead, what you've got is this predatory practice by the corporations. They smell blood in the water, I think. They see that unions are at the weakest level in terms of the percentage of the overall workforce that they've been in quite some time. And so they come after them. And it's not anymore about fairness. It's not about justice. It's not about rewarding loyal employees anymore. They don't give a damn about workers anymore, whether you're loyal or not.
It's about opportunity.
And that mindset has to change, and which kind of lets me, I don't know if you're ready to jump into this right now, but it kind of makes me segue into something I found very interesting about what the UK government is doing. Now, they're a conservative government over there. David Cameron and the Conservative Party, and that's the same party that Margaret Thatcher was in back in the 80s when she crushed the miners' strike back then. Extremely right-wing, extremely anti-union. Well, guess what? They've joined the Raise the Wages movement. And it's just incredible what they've done. David Cameron and the Conservative Party in Britain, in the UK, are talking about a minimum living wage, and they want to fine employers who underpay their workers, and this is a conservative government. So what that tells me is that the mindset that we have here in America, even coming from conservatives, is not written in stone and doesn't have to be that way, and it's not permanent and unchangeable. Even conservatives, you can even reach some folks who think of themselves as conservatives when you talk to them about justice for working people, because guess what? There are both conservative and progressive working people everywhere.
Right.
And so that's an issue that we can have some common ground on. And I've been thinking about that for a long time. It is possible. We don't see it in America, any common ground on that, really.
Well, we used to. I mean,
yeah,
we used to. You go back to Dwight David Eisenhower, someone who I say is a good, good socialist Republican president. If you remember, there was a quote, something he had written to his brother Edgar about anyone who would come out against labor laws or Social Security or the Farm Bill or unemployment or any of those things. They wouldn't be heard from in their political time. They'd be just gone. But he said there were a few. Couple Texas oil millionaires and a couple of crank businessmen, but their numbers were negligible and they were stupid. But it seems stupid seems to be running the country, though, Doug.
It does. I mean, that's what it does seem to be, that stupid's running the country, and even more dangerous. Okay, we've got a situation now where big government in the form of right-wing Republicans primarily who are doing the bidding of billionaires. Okay, it's weird to hear me talk about big government, but let's think about this for a second. Big government and big corporations marching in lockstep together, that equals fascism, and what we're seeing in America, unfortunately, is more and more of a development along that line, where Wall Street and the multinational corporations have such control over politics that you have this unholy alliance between government in some cases and these big businesses, multinational corporations. That's very dangerous to everyone, whether or not you consider yourself progressive or conservative. You do not want that kind of an alliance with the military-industrial complex supporting it all to create a government for yourself, because that government will tend to have fascist tendencies, right-wing tendencies, anti-worker tendencies. What we need is a return to more of a common sense approach that says that we're all in this boat together. We're all Americans, and all working people in America should get a fair deal.
Yeah, and again, go back to that whole idea of reward for work. That you should not be living in poverty if you're working 40 hours a week. You shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. At some point, we've got to think that way again.
We do have to think that way again, and we have unions out there trying to make people understand and see the realities here that we're all facing. And the latest thing is this solidarity in steel, as thousands of steel workers hitting the streets of Pittsburgh, calling on a fair labor contract settlement with the steel industry, and with that company ATI that locked out those workers, those 2,200 workers. Now, it's strange to me to hear people say, "Oh, we got to get rid of unions because they dictate this, they dictate that, they're too powerful, they're too big." They sat down at a negotiating table across the table from a corporation that has, in many cases, holding most of the cards when it comes to these negotiations, and they come to a settlement that both can agree on. That's not dictating anything. That's not big labor throwing its weight around. But at the same time, we shouldn't have big corporations throwing their weight around. We should have an American sensibility here that we all deserve to have a decent standard of living, the American dream, if you will. And to get there, we have to have the liberty, the freedom to be able to form unions and to bargain with our employer, and to have that employer obey the labor laws in this country. That's all it is. I mean, the National Labor Relations Act was intended to just create labor peace so that the economy, the general economic well-being of the United States would be safeguarded. That's really the essence of what that act was about, and that upheld collective bargaining. And that's what we have to return to. And I think maybe one of these days, possibly, we might, but we won't get there unless a critical mass of the people in this country rise up and demand it, whether it's Bernie Sanders' political revolution or some other movement. Yeah. We've got to have a critical mass of the majority of Americans standing up and say, enough is enough. We're going to change this.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Great Depression. This country was being ripped apart brick by brick by people who were starving and they were hungry and they didn't have jobs. And the jobs people did have, they were just being crushed in. And, I go back to, since you brought up the Wagner Act, it gave no rights to employers. It just gave a few rights to workers because they understood at the time the employers had all the rights. We're talking, these were the kings, these were the masters. Here in Pennsylvania, the workers' comp law still talks about the relationship between master and servant, because that's how it was. And sadly, it looks to me we're back there almost.
Well, and when you talk about servant, okay, what the Wagner Act did is give workers the legal authority, the power, right, to collectively bargain with the employer. But if those bargaining sessions failed and a strike had to happen, what would happen was the workers would walk off the job, they would stop getting their paychecks, but the business would stop functioning as well because they couldn't function without workers. And it was hard at that time to bring scabs into the picture because after the Taft-Hartley Act, it was much easier to get scabs in there to replace workers and to do all sorts of things that gave power back to the employer to tilt that playing field back firmly in their direction, But I think it really makes sense that if they cannot reach an agreement, the two parties, workers and the management at any given industry or company, then both should suffer. You know, I mean, what happens is if there's a strike and there's no agreement, if the workers are going without, and if the companies are not able to do business, then reason will prevail ultimately and pretty quickly, and they'll get to the table and they'll come up with an agreement. Somebody will give a little, somebody will take a little, to a reasonable agreement. That's what we got to get back to. Instead, these days it's like alpha dog predatory warfare at the bargaining table.
Yeah, and to me, you listen to all the messaging that's out there, Doug, and the scary thing is the corporate money has really polluted the minds, I think, of a lot of workers who thought, oh, those are just evil, bad, you know. I think Hollywood's done a bit to help as well. That unions are intrinsically bad and that they're evil and all of this. And I got to be honest, I wouldn't be where I am today without carrying that union card, that Teamster card in my wallet for 20 years and having the contract and the wages that I earned doing the work that I did.
I come from a family, Rick, that has that same experience. I mean, my grandmother back in Kentucky was a member of the Kentucky Education Association. My grandfathers on both sides of my family were United Mine Workers of America members in Kentucky. Western Kentucky is where I was born, in the Madisonville area. And then my parents moved north. They became UAW members, both of them, my father and my mother, working for General Motors in Flint. And now I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, the Broadcasters Union, and we are all experienced enough to know in our own personal lives and experience concretely. I have seen the benefits in my family over a couple of generations, 3 generations now, of union members. And what it does is it gives you a little dignity, it gives you a little power and voice on the job, it raises your wages so that you have a fair shot at the American dream of being middle class, and it really brings the country up, lifts all of the country up, and sends us forward rather than regressively sending us backward the way these politicians want us to be. And it cracks me up sometimes when I see the Tea Party used to fly that flag, "Don't tread on me." That's exactly how we feel in the labor movement. It might not be our symbol of choice because the Tea Party has been using it, but we don't want people treading on our rights either. And whether you're talking about big government, in the case of the Tea Party, or you're talking about huge corporations and billionaires, in our case, we don't want those kinds of powers and moneyed interests to be stomping on the rights of American citizens. So there should be some common cause, really, among all people who work for a living, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you come from. And maybe one of these days, the working class in America will wake up and unite.
What does it take? I mean, I look at Bernie Sanders, and just a little bit ago, we talked with Ron Baker from the BCTGM, and I understand Bernie's going to be on the picket line there in Iowa on Friday, walking with the workers there at Ingredion. Is that what it's going to take? Is it going to take politicians? Is it going to take the worker? What's it going to take?
Well, every now and then, I think what it's going to take, and I don't know when this is going to happen, I don't even know how it's going to happen, but every now and then, remember, things completely change. The paradigm completely changes. I mean, you see it in huge issues around the world. You saw it when the Berlin Wall fell, the fall of the Soviet Union, communist system there. You see it in America, in our history, when we finally woke up and said, yeah, women do deserve the right to vote. Yeah, we should get rid of slavery. Yes, we should make these changes in our laws for labor in the 30s, for example. And so progress is possible. Progress has been made in the past, and progress will be made in the future. It's not always predictable, okay? So all we can do is do the best that we can to educate people, to do the best news coverage we can, to discuss these issues on your program and other programs like it, and to talk to people about the real issues and to get them to understand. And once that consciousness gets to a high enough level, I think people will be able to make the changes we need. And you speak about all this anti-union propaganda, but going back to 1936, the Gallup organization polling has consistently shown strong majority support for labor unions in this country. So despite all the propaganda, despite all the billionaires politicians, the American people on some level do get it, but they're just not enough of them actively engaged to push us forward.
And I would argue that the laws are so badly skewed right now that even if you wanted to join a union, it can be pretty difficult because of how these union busters come in and how these corporations fire people and harass and intimidate and all of this stuff. I think if it were like it were in 1935, where you signed a card, you designated a representative and you bargained, we would be at that natural level of about 30%, 35% unionization.
Yeah, I think so too. And to me, a way to understand that is to understand the right to vote. What if our country's law says, yeah, you've got the right to vote, but corporations that employ you have the right to try to convince you that you shouldn't use that right to vote, or bad, terrible things will happen to you. If you use that right to vote, you might lose your livelihood. If you use that right to vote, our companies may shut down. Your community will be economically devastated. You know, we wouldn't tolerate that for a moment. I mean, nobody would tolerate that. So why do they tolerate the right to form a union being subject to that relentless assault? That makes it a hollow right, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You really have no right to do that if you're going to be punished for exercising that right.
Good point. Doug, I appreciate the news, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks so much, Rick. I really enjoyed being with you, man, and good luck with your program.
Thanks so much. Doug Cunningham, Workers Independent News, laborradio.org, their website. You hear their clips every hour here on the program. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
As long as we can live in harmony, why can't we be friends?
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Occasionally, I see something that is so bizarre, so out of place, so wrong, that I have to assume I'm hallucinating. For example, the National Park Service's Pullman National Monument in Chicago. George Pullman? My mind boggled. Our tax dollars are being spent to build a national park in tribute to a narcissistic, paternalistic, brutalistic 19th century robber baron. Yes, Pullman, a notorious union buster and exploiter of working families, is having his history mythologized by today's powers that be, portraying him as a model of the corporate order's historic virtue. At the February 19 official consecration of Pullman's Park, Chicago's thoroughly corporatized mayor, Rahm Emanuel, even gushed, "This will be a monument to Pullman's role in building the American dream." Sure, Your Honor, dream as in nightmare. Over 5,000 workers toiled in Pullman factories making rail cars, including the luxury Palace Sleeper for elite train travel. He condescendingly referred to these workers as his children. But what a dysfunctional father! In the hard winter of 1894, this feudal lord of the manor abruptly slashed his children's meager wages by some 25%, leaving many unable to pay rent and feed their families. Thus came the historic Pullman strike that quickly spread nationwide, led by the union icon Eugene Debs. No problem for Lord George, though. He and other railroad royals rushed to the White House and got President Grover Cleveland to dispatch the U.S. Army to crush the labor rebellion. 30 workers were killed, Debs was arrested on a trumped-up conspiracy charge, and all laborers who had joined the strike were fired and blacklisted. This is Jim Hightower saying, the only way that Pullman National Monument can have any legitimacy is to strew the grounds with sculptures of the 30 dead workers he killed.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service.
I've come here today as the leader of the world's largest economy and its second largest emitter to say that the United States recognizes our role in creating this problem, and we embrace our responsibility to help solve it.
President Obama there speaking Monday in Alaska, part of a 3-day trip north highlighting climate change. The visit comes at a crucial time for global climate talks, with a new treaty set to be signed in Paris in December. The draft text stands at more than 80 pages, and one portion contains 11 different language choices. The treaty is effectively a web of multiple-choice questions, with 196 countries debating the right answer. But while the vast majority of countries see Paris as the best chance to make progress in fighting climate change, some criticize the spectacle of such gatherings and warn they're easily co-opted by corporate interests. One such critic is Bolivian President Evo Morales, who's announced a summit of his own in Bolivia next month to highlight, quote, transnational capitalist interests that endanger the health of the land, food, water, and forests. The 3-day event isn't without precedent. Morales hosted a similar conference in 2010 and drew 30,000 attendees from 100 countries. While Obama hardly threw corporations under the bus during his Alaska speech, he did lash out at global leaders anywhere who look at a future of climate change and decide not to act.
Any leader willing to take a gamble on a future like that Any so-called leader who does not take this issue seriously or treats it like a joke is not fit to lead.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
A man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Vic Smith.
Do you remember back when, I guess it's been a month or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. Remember when Mitt Romney did the charity boxing match with Evander, the real deal, Holyfield? Remember that? Where he got his skinny little buddy into that boxing shorts, and he ran around the ring, and it was fun. And I gave him credit for it. I said, it's a nice thing to do, a little charity, helps out, good stuff. But I said, look, is this the beginning of testing that water to springboard back into the race? Will he be throwing his hat into the ring? Now, there have been reports flying around that with Trump taking center stage, Romney may see an opportunity to kind of step in and say, as the elder statesman of the party, to step in and say, me again. I hope so. I do. I actually it would be interesting to see that dynamic play out, because the reality is Trump, not what Romney wants to see. And evidently Romney has told close personal advisors that not thrilled with Trump. In fact, the report that I said, the chances of him popping in are at this late date kind of tenuous. And as someone who follows this stuff, I don't know that he can do it. But there are some people saying, well, he's got better polling numbers in Iowa and New Hampshire than do Trump, Bush, Scott Walker, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, John Kasich. He's got better numbers than all of them, combined. And he's got the money. Money is not going to be a problem. And you see that it's pointed out that Bush just is not a worker, and I think Trump pointed that out. Bush tried to attack Trump, and Trump goes, "Well, he had to do it." He's not a really high energy guy, so he had to do something. At this point, though, Bush has only done 23 town halls in New Hampshire, where Romney had done like 100. So it kind of goes, you got some work to do. Now, do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. Little. I think part of it's just playing the political game and keeping Romney's name out there. But look, he's got the cash, man. Other than outside of being extraordinarily wealthy himself, him in his parking garage, under his house in the sand. He's also got the Spencer Zwick guy, who is just a fundraising wizard, if you will, who evidently raised him more than $1 billion in the last election. Didn't help much, but the guy's not doing anything right now. He's not affiliated with any campaigns. I guess he chairs the America Rising Super PAC. But he could, along with Bain Capital, along with the Mormon community, along with all of the hedge fund managers and the private equity boys, they could easily get that machine up and running before the next convention. I think it'd be a good thing. I'd like to see Romney jump in. Good thing. Why not? You've got the whole cavalcade of crazy. Why not continue it with one more? The scary part, though, is he would actually look like the sane one, the adult one, because after all, he was, after the Charleston shooting, the first person to come out and say the flag had to go. He was the first person to do that, and I gave him credit for it then, and I give him credit for it now. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming days in the Romney camp Anyway, going to take a quick break. If you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Solidarity in Steel, as thousands of United Steelworkers members hit the streets of Pittsburgh Tuesday. The rally in March called for fair labor contract settlements with U.S. Steel, Allegheny Technologies Incorporated, and ArcelorMittal. Rallies also happened in Chicago and Burns Harbor, Indiana. The two master contracts expire at midnight Tuesday. The master agreements in the steel industry cover about 30,000 workers. ATI locked out 2,200 USW members at 12 locations August 15th after several months of bargaining. That contract expired June 30th. Steelworker Jeremy Williamson told a local Pittsburgh TV station the fight for a fair steel contract is unifying the workers.
It's brought us together. We're probably going to have well over 1,000 or 2,000 people here today, if not more. It sounds like it's going to be bigger than last time. Just glad to be part of it.
OSHA says there were safety violations that factored in the death of Kenneth LaChance, a maintenance manager at Waukesha Iron and Metal in Wisconsin. OSHA is proposing penalties of $42,000 for the 11 safety violations found by OSHA investigators. OSHA says the company didn't require head protection, didn't safely handle compressed gas cylinders, and forklifts were unsafe. The company also failed to adequately train workers to use forklifts. LaChance was killed operating a forklift without a helmet while trying to hoist an oxygen sensor. Christine Zortman, OSHA's area director in Milwaukee, says common sense safety precautions should always be priority one on any work site. The Florida-based Coalition of Immokalee Workers has made major strides in its campaign for fair food to change horrendous working conditions for farm workers in America's produce fields. September 10th through the 13th, their Student Farm Worker Alliance is meeting to launch back-to-school escalation plans in their Wendy's student boycott and to build strength and solidarity across grassroots movements for justice. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers, Gerardo Reyes Chavez, says that the Fair Food Campaign, getting fast food and grocery stores to pay a little more to ensure justice for workers in their supply chains, is resonating nationwide.
This is a time in which conscious consumers are asking for the same thing that we started to ask many years back when we started this fight: to be respected, to be paid a dignified wage. And for the first time, things are changing. And we don't have to give up our dignity when we go to work in the fields.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and from the United Auto Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So have you been following this story down in Kentucky with this Kim Davis, who has said, I'm not going to give those people marriage license because I believe in the sanctity of marriage. Yes, married 4 times, but they're going to somehow ruin it. I got to be honest. It's one of those moments where I go, do your job or don't. Your job is to give marriage license. The law says it is what it is. Don't. And here's the weird thing. Lindsey Graham, a Republican presidential candidate, he agrees, as does Anton Scalia, and probably most of the mainstream Republican thought. But it got me to thinking. My next guest has written just a fantastic book called Intelligent Disobedience, Doing Right When What You're Told to Do is Wrong. The question is this one of those moments where she's just being intelligently disobedient? The author of the book, Ira Chaleff, a great book, and we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com on how you can pick it up. Ira, thanks for taking time for us. Are you there, Ira? Uh-oh, I think we've lost him. You there, Ira?
Yeah.
Oops, I thought I lost you.
No, I'm here.
A very strange moment with our phone system. Anyway, to look at this, is this moment in Kentucky, is this one of those moments where she's being intellectually disobedient?
Well, let me use her case. It's a very problematic case to create a distinction. First of all, when people hear the term intelligent disobedience, they very naturally try to make sense of it, and they say, well, is that the same as civil disobedience? Let me start by drawing a distinction, and that will help the conversation. So civil disobedience, when there's a law that you feel is unjust, and you decide you are going to knowingly and publicly violate that law in order to bring attention to your perception of its injustice with an attempt to change it, that and you're willing to take the consequences, that is civil disobedience. Intelligent disobedience is a narrower topic in that it says within the framework of the law, if I'm being asked to do something that is specifically harmful, I even regardless of what authority is telling me to do it, I have the personal accountability and obligation to say no. That would produce harm. So you're not, in a sense, taking on the bigger issue of trying to change what you consider is an injustice in society. So in this case, you could argue that she is, it's a form of civil disobedience. It may not be civil disobedience that you or I support, but it could be. However, as you say, she's a public official. She has a job. The law is clear now. And so either she complies with the law or steps down or faces the consequences of violating the law. That's a choice we have to give even to people that we disagree with.
No, I'm absolutely with you. And it's not something I want to take away from. I'm a big supporter of civil disobedience, which is why I had asked, what the difference was, because, there's we have just completed a civil rights tour. We went all across the South and talked to people who in the 60s put themselves on the line and with acts of civil disobedience. And I was curious what the difference between the civil part and the intellectual part. So what would the intellectual disobedience be then?
Well, first of all, I don't use the word intellectual, though I guess one could. It's intelligent disobedience. And I didn't invent the term. Let me tell you where it comes from and why I think it's such a useful term. I was teaching a class to mid-level government managers, and we talk about authority and how most of the time it's reasonable to comply with authority, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes authority is telling you to do something that would have a poor outcome, a bad outcome, not necessarily because they're venal, but they have wrong data or whatever. And a woman in my class raised her hand and said, I have an example under the desk. And I said, you do? What do you mean under the desk? And she said, well, there's a dog under the desk, and I am training this dog. It is going to become a guide dog to support a blind person. And after it learns how to obey all the commands it needs to know, and after it's socialized so it can go anywhere in crowded subway stations, etc., it then goes to a higher level trainer to teach it intelligent disobedience. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, well, it's a very high art where the dog has to be able to distinguish if what it's being told is going to produce harm to the team being the human and the dog. It must not obey. It must know how to resist. And I thought, well, what a great metaphor for human development as well. We need to know most of the time, okay, we have laws, we have rules. Most of the time it's okay to follow them. Sometimes it's not. How do we prepare ourselves to know what the difference is and how to resist when it's appropriate to do so.
Interesting. So, so if the dog's leading a blind guy and the blind guy says go, the dog goes, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, and not only does it say we're not going to do that, it has a couple of other obligations. Let's say, for example, that the blind person is, they miscalculated and they're about to step down a flight of stairs and really take a bad fall. The dog is trained to do what's called a counter pull, which is to actually yank them in the opposite direction of the order that's been given. I think sometimes we need to yank authorities in the opposite direction. Also, sometimes, let's say the blind person is walking down the street where he or she normally goes, and there's construction. And so the dog resists obeying, but now it can't just leave the blind person stranded. So it has to come up with alternatives to safely get the person to the goal. And remember, the dog can easily go under or over obstacles that the person can't. So it really has to think about the other person who's in its care and how to safely help the other person do what needs to be done. Again, a lot of metaphors for, I think, how we could do a better job in our own social system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking our police force. I'm thinking education with teachers, doctors, nurses. There's a lot of places where you're told to do something. This is your job. You go do it, and you go. But that's not really the best way to get there.
Yeah, all of the above. You named, any profession where there's risk, health, safety, life. This is a very important skill set. So let's use an example here. The old school in hospitals, the doctor ordered you to do something and you were a nurse and you did it. Well, that's not how it works anymore. We've had, about 100,000 wrong deaths in hospitals each year. And one of the things we now do in most hospitals before and after a surgical procedure is every single member of the team has to vocalize that it's okay with him or her to start the operation. In other words, we've got the right patient, the right limb, we've got the right replacement part, and they have to vocalize that it's okay to end the operation. So if a nurse says, well, I counted 13 sponges in and we've only taken 12 out, so it's not okay to end the operation, the surgeon, regardless of all of his or her training and stature, has to take another look. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to do more and more in society.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's a lot of things. I mean, one of the issues that brought up in the book, talking about these high-stake testing and these standardized testing with teachers that I've talked to who they fundamentally disagree with how these tests are being given, how much weight they're being given, and how they're affecting the children. And we're seeing some acts of civil disobedience, but this gives, I think, a different take.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting contemporary situation here. And if we're not going to have an authoritarian culture, and of course, some of your listeners will say, well, we already have one. Too late, buddy. But in fact, we don't have the level of authoritarianism that, unfortunately, some societies sink to.
Yeah, and I would also argue class has a lot to do with it. There's some classes in our country who believes we live in an authoritarian regime.
Well, that's right, and and this is a continuum. So I'm not saying we don't, but it can get worse. And therefore, to counteract that, Thomas Jefferson said, every once in a while we need a little bit of rebellion. And so what I see happening, with the parents saying, no, I don't want my kid to get standardized testing. Now I understand that there are different sides to this issue, and some of this. The civil rights groups are concerned about that this could wind up working against inner city minority neighborhoods. But at the same time, I think that not just lockstep and sheep-like following the orders that are coming down is healthy for our democracy.
I agree. Absolutely. That whole I was just following orders doesn't fly. The book, Intelligent Disobedience, Doing Right When What You're Told is to do is wrong. Ira Chaleff's the author. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com, how you can get to his website, irachaleff.com, that you can pick it up. But, going back to that frame, because we heard that a lot, especially during the Abu Ghraib and all of that stuff. And, even with some of the police things, I'm just following orders. You're saying that's not enough.
No, it's not. What I would have loved to see, for example, in Ferguson, I would have loved to see, and who knows, maybe it even occurred. We don't always hear about these things, but it wasn't successful, obviously. I would have liked to see when the police chief said, let's bring out the armored personnel carrier to quell this. I would have liked to see a sergeant or even a patrol officer say, sir, we've just spent the last 2 years committed to trying to improve community relations, and bringing out an armored personnel carrier is not the right thing to do. So, in other words, that dialogue within the law enforcement community, I think, is as important as the dialogue between the community and the law enforcement apparatus.
Or somebody who was just standing by, didn't even have to be a policeman or somebody else going, what? Somebody in the crowd, because, bystander apathy is a huge problem as well, because sometimes we see things going on and we don't pay attention to that either.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, the analysis of bullying, for example, shows that it's the bystander who has the most psychological power in the situation. The victim is often too traumatized. But here's an important point. If the first bystander to stand up will often then become the target of the bullying.
Yep.
But if a second and third bystander support the first bystander, usually the bullying will back down. So again, this is an important lesson because, when you blow this up to a national scale, lack of bystander activity is what allows genocide to happen. So, these are serious issues. And what I'm hoping to do in this book is to have us examine in our day-to-day lives, how do we start to exercise this ability of constructive intelligent disobedience? I'm not talking about obstructionist, behavior, but constructive, good citizenship, behavior that will collectively help us be a more personally accountable and collectively accountable society.
Wow, talk about lofty goals. I'm just trying to get through the next day. You're talking about saving humanity.
Well, saving humanity, of course, is something I've tried to do in the past, and I failed pretty badly. So, but let me say that I do believe that we can continue to improve a culture. But it takes really taking an examination of what are we doing and is it what we want to be doing? So, for example, in the school system, we know we need to have classrooms that are fairly orderly, but if we put more emphasis on obedience in the classroom than we do on creativity, we're going to get a society which is either overly obedient to authority, which is dangerous to a democracy, or overly, resistive to authority because authority is mistreating it. So we really need to think about how do we balance. And in the book, it was a journey for me. I discovered that it doesn't take all that much to create a little bit more balance between obedience and intelligent disobedience, but it does take some attention to the subject.
Right.
I'm hoping to start that dialogue at parent group levels, teacher programs, etc.
No, and it's a fantastic endeavor, and I think it's something well worthwhile because you're too long. And I've been saying this for years. What and you could say whoever they are, be it politicians, corporate entities, whoever. What they want out of education are just obedient workers, people who are smart enough to push the buttons and never asking why. And that's what our education system, sadly, is moving towards, this assembly line, punching out the little widgets at the end of the day kind of model.
Interestingly enough, I don't actually fully share that perspective. I know it's a common perspective because I do believe that if the United States has any competitive advantage, and we're losing a lot of competitive advantage in different ways. If it has any, it's in the cutting edge of creativity. For example, in computer technology, biotechnology, etc. So, and those people know they need creative people who think creatively, new ways to solve problems, etc. So I'm not sure exactly, how it is that if we only create people who are robotic, if you will, that it serves that purpose. I think there's a disconnect there, and that there may be some common ground that we can find in order to strike the right balance.
And I hope we do. But, look, I do a lot of work in my kids' schools, and the high regimentation. We're going to do this for 6 minutes, this for 8 minutes, and the simple, single-minded focus on these tests. We've got to pass the test, and that being the only real aim to me is what gives me this position and where I see things going.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I take this up head on in the book. The over-regimentation in the classroom has absolutely got to be put into balance with developing, the whole people who can think for themselves and who can eventually, become the citizens that we need. And this test, anytime you put extreme pressure on people to make a metric, I don't care if it's in a corporation, in public service, in an educational system, and you threaten them with defunding the school, etc., they are going to, unfortunately, respond to that pressure by gaming the system. And then we see what happened in Atlanta, with 10 or 12 educators who got jail sentences. What I'm trying to do in this book is get people to understand, even when you're under that kind of pressure, and it seems that your job is at stake, if you don't do what you're being told, and maybe it is at stake, there are bigger questions, and in fact, there are bigger things at stake, including potentially going to jail if you cross the line in order to just do what seems to be expedient right now. So this is tough stuff, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I'm hoping to start the conversation that people will find answers for themselves and within their work groups, within their school communities.
Well, it is an interesting book and an interesting educational and intellectual kind of exercise, and I highly suggest people take a look at it. Intelligent Disobedience, the name of the book, doing right when what you're told is wrong. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com, or you can go to irachaleff.com.
Rick, just let me say that because Ira Chaleff doesn't roll off the tongue in terms of spelling it, they can also go to intelligentdisobedience.net. I have to emphasize .net. It'll get them to the same place.
There you go. Either way, you can go to our site and get it, or intelligentdisobedience.net. We'll make sure we get links at thericksmithshow.com. Ira, it was really great talking with you. I appreciate it, and nice job here.
Thanks so much, Rick.
All right, let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I know that you are wrong. Headstrong, we're headstrong. Back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong if this is not where you belong. I won't give everything away.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1885. White miners in Rock Spring, Wyoming, planned to wipe out the entire town's Chinese community. Chinese immigrants came to the United States looking for work, first in the California gold mines, then as laborers on the Transcontinental Railroad. Later, some worked for the Union Pacific-owned coal mines, including the one in Rock Springs. Union Pacific used racial animosity to divide its labor force. The company quashed the union at Rock Springs and only rehired 50 white miners. The other 150 miners were Chinese. And on this morning, 2 white miners went to the mines and beat 2 Chinese miners, 1 to death. A mob of 150 whites armed with rifles marched into Chinatown. The mob gave Chinese residents an hour to pack up and leave. However, after 30 minutes, some started shooting off their rifles. 1 Chinese miner was killed. The Chinese workers panicked and tried to flee. White rioters robbed, beat, and even killed the Chinese workers that they could catch. In a report to the New York Chinese consulate, Chinese survivors related some of the rioters would let a Chinese go after depriving him of all his gold and silver, while another would be beaten with the butt ends of the weapon before being let go. Some of the rioters would shoot a Chinese dead on the spot. Some stood by, shouting loudly and laughing and clapping their hands. That night, white rioters burned down every building in Chinatown. In all, 28 Chinese workers were killed. President Grover Cleveland sent in federal troops to quell the violence. In the aftermath, the Chinese workers did not want to return to work. Union Pacific did not want to lose its cheap labor force and forced their return to the mines. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the disappearance of William Morgan that ignited the first third-party movement in American politics. The most credible explanation for what became of Mr. Morgan was that he was drowned in the Niagara River by a group of Masons. News of the alleged murder spread quickly across the country. At the same time, a vast segment of the U.S. citizenry believed that the Masons were a corrupt, elitist secret society and should be purged from the many public offices they held. Morgan's alleged murder was all it took to trigger a ferocious anti-Mason movement. Opposition to Masonry was taken up by churches as a religious crusade, and some churches condemned Freemasonry. Politicians saw an opportunity also. The politics of most of the 1820s and 30s was a battle between John Quincy Adams supporters and Democrats that followed Andrew Jackson. Join us again for a third political party. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I gotta listen to man's written on the palm of my hands. I'm on this and you got no right stand. We live in the about.
Interestingly enough, this Kim Davis situation has got Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney on the side saying that this Miss Davis obligated to serve the gays, and you kind of at some point you've got to go, how much of this is ideology? How much of this is something that this woman truly believes, or is it, hey, maybe we can make a buck off of this? How much of this is the right-wing schemery that happens? Because this woman has to know that when she steps forward and puts herself into this kind of a spotlight, that all of the aims, the forces, the eyes of the world are going to be digging through her past. And this woman is really one of those examples of, I think what the Bible talks about in not throwing stones or take the log out of your own eye before you look at someone else, because here's a woman who's been married 4 times. And look, I'm not one to go into character assassination. I'm not one. I don't care about all the Maury Povich type background she's had, but she has to know that there are going to be forces out there that are going to do that. And there's a ton of stuff, as most people who are then put under that magnifying glass would find out about any of us. And what's frustrating and angering to me is you've got these groups who are going to use this woman and push her out there and make her the poster child for it. And I'm sure tons of promises were made, not warning that, your life as you know it is now open for everybody. And every bizarre thing you've done, everything that you're not proud of is now front and center. And to me, it highlights another thing. Here's someone who, 4 times married, loves getting married. That's great. I don't have a problem with it. Don't care. None of my business. But to then point the finger at somebody else and say, you don't have the right to get married is really just twisted and bizarre to me. And what is it about these fanatics? If that's what she really is and not just a gold digger, what is it about these people who think that the rules should apply to others, but not them? It's really just kind of bizarre to me. One of those kind of just, strange things. Now, in the interview that Liz and Dick Cheney did with one of the crazy right-wing stations, the argument was, now this could be the first step in making churches and synagogues support same-sex marriage. And Liz Cheney jumped in and said, my dad said it's the law of the land. The court has ruled she is not an employee of a church or a synagogue. She's a government employee. She has an obligation to uphold the law. And to me, that's where all this is. That's where all this lies. If it were a church that she was working at and someone was saying, you have to do this, I would be one of the first people saying, no, that's not what we do here. But this is our government. This is our law. Whether you like it or not, it's the law of the land right now. You want to work to change it, you do that. Just very interesting times we live in. But I'm curious to see what happens to her. I'm curious to see, because, in an at-will employment state, she would just be fired for not following orders and gross insubordination. This has nothing to do with religious freedom. Nothing. Let's take a quick break. Right back with the news. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
We are not moving fast enough.
President Obama makes powerful case for climate action on the edge of the melting Arctic.
Amazing. At one point, we had 4 category hurricanes in the Pacific.
2015 hurricane season has now entered weird, record-breaking territory. Huge news for electric cars. Plus,
The guy saw that mountain when he was one of the first up there and named it after the president. No reason to change it.
right-wingers apoplectic over renaming of nation's tallest mountain.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You said, oh, Bill Maher, he's going to drag me through the mud. Yeah. First of all, you're in California. It hasn't rained in 4 years. There's no mud.
Yeah. It's true. There's no mud here in California. None. Zero. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you seem to be quite moved by the president's speech up in the Arctic.
Yeah, it was a very, very powerful speech, and I highly recommend listening to it. He was at the Glacier Conference in Alaska. He called for urgent and aggressive global action on climate change. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And with that background of melting glaciers and melting permafrost, Obama emphasized the need to act quickly or suffer the consequences.
The Arctic is the leading edge of climate change. It is happening here. It is happening now. And climate change is a trend that affects all trends. Economic trends, security trends, everything will be impacted.
And he was blunt about the consequences of continuing business as usual.
The fact is that climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it. We are not moving fast enough. If we were to abandon our course of action, if we stop trying to build a clean energy economy and reduce carbon pollution, if we do nothing to keep glaciers from melting faster and oceans from rising faster and forests from burning faster and storms from growing stronger, we will condemn our children to a planet beyond their capacity to repair.
The Glacier Conference coincides with the United States taking its turn as leader of the Arctic Council. That's made up of all 8 countries that have territory in the Arctic, including Russia, which is now asserting even more territorial rights. Here in the U.S., environmental groups have called hypocrisy on Obama's approval of offshore oil drilling in the fragile Arctic, which will release even more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Did the president speak to that apparent contradiction, decrying climate change, even after he's approved drilling in the otherwise pristine Arctic?
No, but Obama administration officials have previously said that their focus is to balance the needs of competing stakeholders, and we still need that oil, so that justifies drilling.
Okay.
Right-wing media, meanwhile, are apoplectic over Obama's announcement to restore the original Native American name to the nation's tallest mountain. Mount McKinley, named for early 20th century President William McKinley, who never actually visited it, was named by a gold prospector, a white guy. McKinley died in office a short time later. Now the mountain will be called what it has been called for thousands of years, Denali.
It's hysterical because Alaska is completely in favor of this. The only ones who seem to be furious about it are the right-wingers and the folks from Ohio, including Republican Senator Rob Portman, who said the mountain was named for President McKinley out of respect following his assassination. Newsflash for Republican U.S. Senator from Ohio, Rob Portman: the mountain was named Mount McKinley years before McKinley was killed.
Meanwhile, for the first time in recorded history, on Saturday, there were a record 3 simultaneous typhoons, all Category 4, churning in the eastern and central Pacific Ocean. Just to keep that in perspective, until this year, there had been only 3 hurricanes total in that region since 1950. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that the Pacific Ocean is currently warmer than it has ever been in recorded history. And over in the Atlantic Ocean, newly formed Hurricane Fred is the farthest east a hurricane has ever formed off the coast of Africa, and it has generated the first ever hurricane warning for the Cape Verde Islands. The first ever in history. Finally, big news for the car industry. Electric car maker Tesla has again achieved the highest possible rating from Consumer Reports, 103 on a 100-point scale, the only car ever to do so. And BMW has announced that it is going all electric. Within 10 years, it will build only electric plug-in hybrid cars, converting its entire fleet in anticipation of stricter carbon emissions laws as the world transitions to clean energy.
Every BMW will be electric or hybrid in one way or another.
Yep.
In 10 years.
Yep, it's happening.
It's happening. For much more on all of these stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It is happening here. It is happening now.
Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Right here, right now. There is no other place I want to be.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Yeah, the most important issue of the day, huh? Seems to be this crazy woman from Kentucky that I must have gotten like 15 emails of people saying that she should just all be fired. I can't believe how many people want to see this poor woman fired. Being a little delusional, I don't think should get you fired. Maybe a little job retraining. I don't know. Anyway, let's find out what's going on with that. And of course, everything else in the free world. Maybe there's some other important news out there beside the crazy woman from Kentucky. We've got Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, always a pleasure to weigh in.
So you got the crazy woman in Kentucky, Lindsey Graham, saying she's got to do it. Dick Cheney saying she's got to do it. Even people saying Scalia has written that it's her job. She has to do it. Why isn't she doing it?
Well, her reasons don't hold any legal weight, but, why let that slow you down? My guess is what's going to happen here. So we've got a hearing at 11 a.m. Thursday morning. This is the Kentucky District Judge David Bunning, who has already pretty thoroughly rejected most of her claims here. The two that she was using was that, look, this was free speech, that she's being compelled to give this speech and she should object. But the judge very flatly in his ruling said this is government speech, not personal speech, and therefore it's not subject to any First Amendment protection. And then he also went on to reject her arguments under the Religious Test Clause, which I'm not familiar with, and Kentucky's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is one of a number of these sort of conscience passed through state legislatures recently. And he said it's unlikely that her argument meets the threshold here because she's not suffering a substantial burden upon her religious beliefs, namely because this is, basically signifying these couples' right to marry doesn't compel her to actually condone or approve of same-sex marriage. That, his argument that this is much less direct endorsement of the practices than she's arguing. So again, that's not going to convince her supporters to abandon her cause here. But I do think it really increases the likelihood that when this hearing is held tomorrow, that she will be found to be in contempt of court, which is what the ACLU is petitioning to do here. What I will also predict, and I'm actually going to be interviewing the Kentucky ACLU in just a matter of moments after we get off the phone, but I want to know, if she gets fined, let's say $100,000, they don't want her to go to jail because maybe she'd be seen as some sort of martyr for the cause. But if she's fined, aren't there like millions of dollars from all these groups that wanted to ban gay marriage that aren't being used anymore that could just go to some fund where she could keep getting fined and keep, having donations to pay for all these fines, and she would never have to issue any marriage certificates. So I'm not really sure what the end game is here, but I do think in the short term it will involve her being found to be in contempt of court.
How much of this do you think is her being propped into this, and how much of this is her true, honest belief? We've seen a lot of reports about her past, married 4 times, loves marriage, staying married kind of a little more difficult. And then all the Maury Povich stuff that has been leaking out all over the place. How much of it is, true ideological belief, and how much of it is, maybe the lust of the green stuff?
I don't know. I've listened to some of her statements, and she does seem pretty sincere. I mean, I am upset by her actions here. I think it's just not becoming of a position serving this country, which this kind of job entails. And she should go to the ministry where it looks like she'd be quite successful. But again, I think she's speaking from the heart here. And there's maybe some financial payoff in the long run. But hey, getting in the public spotlight for so many things seems to involve sort of a promise of financial gain. I mean, look at our folks running for president here, up and down the ticket. Most of them know they're not going to get elected, but they're doing it to raise their star status and probably help lead to some sort of job down the line. So maybe she's included in that, but she does seem to fit the bill pretty successfully, and is arguing, I think, from the heart. Okay, well, the other part of this is Kentucky's an at-will employment state. You're not doing your job. Your job is to issue license. You're fired. I mean, that's to me the end result. We'll see. I mean, I wasn't aware of that. I have been told that because she's an elected official, there would need to be some sort of impeachment or snap election here to try to replace her. Maybe there's some added details in there that are quite relevant. So thanks for pointing that out, and I'll look into that. But my understanding was that she's pretty well insulated here from losing her job, but it would be great if that's not the case. Oh, that's, I guess, my mistake on that. I thought she was... No, I got to find out. Yeah. But she was not appointed. This was an elected role. Oh, I thought she was appointed. My mistake on that. Thank you for clarifying. Sure. Good. All right. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what comes out of it. Let's move on to the big debates. I guess CNN's changing their criteria. What's going on? Well, yeah, they had basically said this is for the September 16th presidential debate out on the West Coast in California. And what they've been saying their criteria was going to be was they're going to look at 3 polls since the last debate. So basically from August 6th on, there hasn't been very many national polls. And then they were going to average that out with 9 polls from the several months prior to the beginning of August, which seemed pretty unfair to me, namely because, you know, there were many fewer candidates in the race when you started looking to midsummer and before. So thus, candidates that have now since really fallen apart. I look at the Huckabees and the Rand Pauls.
And the Walker.
It was much easier. Even Jeb Bush. I mean, really, it's incredible how many candidates are just seeing their numbers getting worse as time goes by, and Ben Carson and Donald Trump eat up more and more of the electorate, which is astonishing. But yeah, I mean, I think that was unfair. And so the main complaints about this process were coming from Carly Fiorina, who was saying, oh, they're trying to shut me out. They don't like these radical voices, these people speaking truth to power, and they're trying to protect Donald Trump and their ratings. Well, I think they relented. I think, you know, a large part of this is that CNN also realizes that Carly Fiorina being on stage will probably help ratings too, because she hasn't held back against Hillary Clinton and she hasn't held back against Donald Trump. So pack a few more fireworks onto the barge and let's get this thing going. If this was another candidate making the claim of being squeezed out, let's say Jim Gilmore or George Pataki, I don't know if they'd be quite as open to changing things. But they're going to look at just polls from after that first debate until the time of the second debate. And if you're in the top 10 at any point, then you get in.
All right.
That will likely mean we've got 11 people on stage. So if you thought it was hectic last time, add in one more body. It's going to be a mess. But I do think the line will draw there. This is not like, hey, these new rules are going to mean there are 18 people on stage. The Santorums and Lindsey Grahams and the Rick Perrys and the like are so much further down the list. And they've not hopped into the top 10 at all, if not in the last months especially. So I think this is the final lineup. But yeah, Fiorina's going to be on stage, and I'm sure CNN loves that for the ratings, and the GOP, for the sake of at least preaching a little diversity, probably doesn't mind it as well.
No, and you're going to have a woman, you're going to have a black guy, and you're going to have a whole bunch of rich people, and a whole bunch of puppets of rich people. Yeah, that's good. But I got to tell you, I'm thrilled to see Carly up there, because I think she'll go at Donald with the same kind of zeal and vengeance that none of the other ones did the last time. I think she'll go after him.
Yeah, no, she's shown no signs of holding back. Look, it was easy for her, I think, to be the come-from-behind underdog winner of the last debate because she could attack everyone from afar. You know, I don't know how well her attacks are going to go against Trump when they're on the same stage. So sort of a mixed blessing, I suppose. But you do, if you want to win, you got to get to the big kids table. And so this is what it takes. My guess is she'll temper things down a little bit because, when you're commanding 35% of the Republican electorate here, and a big cross-section of the electorate, not an easy demographic to single out with a given one-liner, you could likely come under more fire than you're prepared to if you stake your whole, upshot on attacking the front runner. So it may have worked in other cycles when you had boom or bust candidates, like in the 2012 Republican cycle. I think it was pretty easy for everyone to train their fire on the head honcho and to take them down. I think Trump has shown a little bit more staying power, so she's going to have to be careful. And I don't think she'll be quite as fiery as she was in the last debate. But it'll make for good TV.
I can't wait. I've got it circled on my calendar. Do you think Mitt Romney jumps in? I've been hearing some squawkings that he's considering, or there's some people trying to push him into. You think Mittens jumps in?
I don't think he does, though. It's always fun to have familiar candidates get back in the pack. And I frankly think he's more interesting than a lot of these guys. I mean, here we are several months into getting to know Scott Walker and Jeb Bush, and these guys seem to me to be really quite boring and one-dimensional. So in many ways, I think Mitt Romney, even though, boy, that documentary on Netflix made him seem like an even straighter shooter than we thought, I still think he's a compelling candidate and a good one. I mean, you do get better every time you run. His campaign last cycle was definitely better than the one before. Yep. So I think he'd be formidable. That said, and even though I'm sure if he really wanted to get into this race, these sort of one-on-one meetings he's been having with everyone at his summer house up there on Lake Winnipesaukee are, we could probably do some interesting profiling of his opponents and their weaknesses. They think they're just going out for a milkshake. And in fact, he's like picking their brains and figuring out how to exploit their weaknesses. That said, I don't think he's that kind of guy, and I'm sure he's going to sit on the sidelines for this one.
Yeah, and be the guy handing out the money, maybe. But he would definitely have the cash. Let's look internationally. What's going on in the UN? I guess there's a scandal brewing.
Sort of a scandal. I think it's parliamentary procedure at its best, but other people will disagree. Remember, I think it was in April, I was in Israel. We were covering the elections there, and the U.S. was pretty frustrated with the outcome. They didn't like that Benjamin Netanyahu was going to be back in office, and they particularly did not like that in the waning days of the campaign, he disavowed the notion of a independent Palestinian state so long as he was in office. So the White House sort of threatened something that they had never threatened before, which was, no, if there's a Security Council resolution that would help endorse Palestinian statehood, maybe we won't veto it. Well, I think that threat is empty now. The U.S. policy on Israel is back to, pretty strong support, I believe, at least at the United Nations. So what Palestine has done is they've abandoned, at least for the time being, the push to get a statehood resolution through. But they've done something else, and they're relying much more on the value of visual symbolism here. They are introducing, or have already introduced, a resolution to have the Palestinian flag raised at the United Nations during the General Assembly.
Wow.
It would not just be temporary, it'd be permanent. And how they did this was not say, hey, we just want it for ourselves. They said any non-member observer states of the United Nations should also be allowed to raise their flags. Well, conveniently enough, there are only two countries that really fit the bill, or territories, Palestine and the Vatican. The Vatican came out and said, hey, we didn't want anything to do with this resolution. Please take our name off. We didn't sign on to this. We're happy with the status quo. So Palestine said, okay, we'll remove your name, but everyone knows, it could apply to you as well. And we're just going to introduce this resolution anyways. It's up for a vote next Thursday. It's very likely to pass by a wide margin. I think 2/3 of countries in the United Nations have voted for statehood in the past. So my guess would be even more will vote to get the flag up there. And when Mahmoud Abbas comes to the United Nations in a few weeks and Netanyahu's in the other building, he's going to walk out to the lawn and raise this flag up. I think this is going to work. I think there is tremendous value in visual symbolism. When people look at the flag, they'll say, hey, Palestine, they have a flag, but they're not considered a state. That's sort of silly. And I think that helps advance their cause in a meaningful way. So an interesting parliamentary maneuver here that I think will be successful for.
All righty. And I understand millions of workers in India are on strike today. What are they striking over?
Interesting news clipping, one that not getting talked about at all, though. It's 150 million workers striking at one time. I mean, can you imagine? That's 12% of the Indian population. And it's not just people from one sector. These are bankers, they are miners, they are taxi and bus drivers. They are protesting a labor law reforms that Narendra Modi has been trying to implement ever since he came into office last year. He's been about these grand schemes. Let's redo the country's infrastructure, and he doesn't hold back. I mean, he unveils dozens and dozens of policy changes in one sitting. And so the labor laws are really frustrating to people. Among other things, he's going to raise the minimum number of employees of a corporation such that, I guess the rule now is if you've got a firm of 100 people or more, you've got to get government permission before you lay anybody off. They're going to raise that to 300, which maybe seems like an incremental jump, but there are apparently a huge number of businesses in India between 100 and 300 people. So they're not going to need permission to do layoffs anymore. They are reducing the number of labor laws from 44 to 4, and a whole host of other measures, including mass privatizations of industries and different sectors. Again, amazing to see this kind of union coordination here, really with only one exception. They all decided to follow through on this threat to walk out. So interesting. We got one more day of this on Thursday, and we'll see if Narendra Modi changes his tune at all.
Interesting. I'll have to take a look at it. Luke, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Hey, you bet. Take care.
Great so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
for and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service.
I've come here today as the leader of the world's largest economy and its second largest emitter to say that the United States recognizes our role in creating this problem, and we embrace our responsibility to help solve it.
President Obama there speaking Monday in Alaska, part of a 3-day trip north highlighting climate change. The visit comes at a crucial time for global climate talks, with a new treaty set to be signed in Paris in December. The draft text stands at more than 80 pages, and one portion contains 11 different language choices. The treaty is effectively a web of multiple choice questions, with 196 countries debating the right answer. But while the vast majority of countries see Paris as the best chance to make progress in fighting climate change, some criticize the spectacle of such gatherings and warn they're easily co-opted by corporate interests. One such critic is Bolivian President Evo Morales, who's announced a summit of his own in Bolivia next month to highlight, quote, transnational capitalist interests that endanger the health of the land, food, water, and forests. The 3-day event isn't without precedent. Morales hosted a similar conference in 2010 and drew 30,000 attendees from 100 countries. While Obama hardly threw corporations under the bus during his Alaska speech, he did lash out at global leaders anywhere who look at a future of climate change and decide not to act.
Any leader willing to take a gamble on a future like that, any so-called leader who does not take this issue seriously or treats it like a joke, is not fit to lead.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but know they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
These are words you should tell the truth. You're lying in a trailer, and now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide?
It's one of those sad stories. How many people remember the name Lawrence Phillips? Any college football fans would remember Phillips. He was really a fantastic running back. Had amazing, really abilities at the University of Nebraska. And in fact, was drafted 6th overall in the NFL draft back in, I believe it was 1996. But again, one of those situations where you've got a troubled person, couldn't handle the fame, couldn't handle seems like basically anything. Always seemed to be getting into trouble for one thing or another. If it wasn't choking his girlfriend, it was trying to run over some high school kids. Evidently, he was sentenced to 31 years in prison for a bunch of stuff. But 31 years, his football days most certainly long over, and a good portion, a good chunk of his life mostly over. Well, now completely done. Evidently, he murdered his cellmate, a 37-year-old guy named Damon Soward, strangled him to death in the Kern Valley State Prison there in California. He has been charged with murder. Now, the prosecutor said they're not going to seek the death penalty, but the reality is you throw 31 years, and at the end of that, you then start serving a murder charge. Gonna be a while. Gonna be a while before Lawrence Phillips finds fresh air. And you gotta look at, the St. Louis Rams thought somehow they could take this guy and turn him around. Didn't happen. And I remember what a tragedy the whole thing is. Just sad stuff. And it gave me that kind of, wow, what a screwed up situation. All the promise, all the opportunity, all of that, and just wasted. Jeez, man, just nuts. Anyway, today, if you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you got to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. As always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com. In the coming days, we're going to continue to talk about the education crisis that's going on. You look at the Chester Upland School District, really just, I don't even know where you begin with what we've done to the public education system. But we're going to continue to focus on that. Also, maybe a little bit of minimum wage stuff. Just so much to get to. Hope you had a great day. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, and amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm